one of the more iconic plants within the PvZ universe. Maybe mostly iconic in bad ways if we look at Garden Warfare 2, but since we're looking at PvZ2 today, we just have to imagine it in a good light. Because in PvZ2, it's actually a pretty atrocious plant. So I thought, why not try to solo the entire game using only a max level Chomper. Chomper is the plant I've been most excited for because it has the capabilities to deal damage to everything, but at the same time not be too overpowered like the lightning reed was. So let's see if it was able to beat the entire game by itself. But before we begin, let me lay down the rules for you. Only Chomper, no power-ups or Zen Garden, skip all levels that force the use of another plant, pre-placed plants are fine, and lastly, coins earned throughout the challenge can be used to buy plant food, but no replaying levels to farm coins. Okay. Let's begin. Day 1 starts off with me placing a Chomper in the back lane. Then I quickly realized that this was a mistake because the zombies would take too long to get back there. So I placed one up front. And then as 2 zombies came into the adjacent lanes, I placed 2 more Chompers. Later placing Chompers in the outer lanes as zombies were sent there as well. And with this measly setup, we're able to beat day 1. Day 2 is a pretty interesting one because I have to start off by quickly shoveling all the plants that are on screen. And then you might be thinking, how do I beat all these zombies without the use of a Chomper? Well, something pretty cool about this level is that all the lawnmowers replenish. So we let all the lawnmowers take care of everything. Day 3, again, we can bring in Chomper, and we start off by shoveling all 3 of these plants. Next, planting 2 Chompers in the lanes that the first 2 zombies are sent in. We place a Chomper in this bottom lane to quickly get rid of the raw zombie from stealing our sun. And you might have noticed that it plant fooded right as I planted it. And this is one of the perks for it being Mastery 200. And as this level plays in the background, let me quickly go over everything that comes with the Chomper being max level. Its sun cost goes from 150 to 75. Its recharge rate goes from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. Its health increases from 300 to 900. Its chew speed of the zombies goes from 17 seconds to 7 seconds. And the amount of zombies it can eat before it has to chew goes from 2 to 4. And lastly, it has a 1 in 5 chance to plant food whenever I place it down. So its stats are pretty decent, but I think the only thing that holds it back compared to the other plants that we've done is its sun cost. Oh yeah, and only about 6% of people that watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free and it would help out a lot. And of course, you can always unsubscribe. Day 7 has this weird triangle formation of gravestones in the front. As there's still one column open, I decided to place my beginning Chompers up there. But then some zombies were escaping past using the sandstorms, so I had to start placing the Chompers behind the gravestones as well. We beat most of the zombies normally, and with this Chomper sucking these last few zombies, the level was finished off. Yeah, it's a little too easy to make those jokes with Chompers, so just be ready. Day 8 starts off with me shoveling these pre-placed potato mines. Then I placed a Chomper to take care of the Explorer zombie, but it got burned. And I panicked because I thought we were going to have another Torchwood situation. But then the second one was able to eat it, which left me kind of confused because the second one at the bottom got burned as well. But then as I placed another Chomper, that one ate it. I didn't really know how to feel about this because I was scared, but also thankful that there was still a way to beat the Explorers. Also, this Chomper at the front ate it in one try. So it wasn't that we needed 2 Chompers to beat one. But with a couple more Explorer zombies and a lot more Chompers, day 8 was thankfully beat. Day 9 had this one Explorer zombie who torched this Chomper, but then it was eaten by the second one. But behind it came a horde of more Explorers. And we're able to take care of most of them. But this last one got through all the Chompers and made it all the way to the mower, taking it out. But thankfully, that was all of day 9. Day 10 had a random assortment of gravestones and 1 flag. And as the levels still weren't going to be too challenging, I was still placing the Chompers up front to make them go by faster. Later on in the harder levels, you'll see me place the Chompers in the very back so I can stall and get more sun. Surprisingly this level, this one Chomper was eaten by these zombies, but then a second Chomper took them out. Day 12 had even more gravestones, so I started placing my Chompers early just to free up some space. But unfortunately, the first zombie wasn't set in the top 2 lanes, but in the bottom middle lane, so I had to collect some sun and place a Chomper there. Next step was to gobble the sun gobbler. We can't let him do too much gobbling. Max level Chomper is also pretty cool because it doesn't swallow the coffin zombie, but its attack still does enough damage to one-shot it. But then as some sandstorms were coming in, I was forced to place more Chompers in the back. And with these defenses and a couple of plant food, we're able to beat day 12. Day 13 had mold colonies blocking the back 2 lanes. And for some reason this time I decided to plant all the Chompers in the very middle lane. And then later realized that this wasn't really needed because there were no Explorer zombies this level. So I stopped stalling going for sun and started placing chompers a little up front, and this made the level end much faster. Day 14 had 2 smiley faces of gravestones. Well, lopsided smiley faces of gravestones. There was also 2 flags with a decent amount of zombies who are actually taking out some of our chompers, but it still wasn't enough to take us down. Day 15 is a nice level because it gives us 3 sunflowers to protect, and even though there are 3 flags this level, the sunflowers sun production makes this really easy, and with their help we're able to nicely place our chompers and take down day 15. Day 16 has some weirdly placed gravestones who don't really do much. The explorer zombie also comes back, but this chomper in the front was able to handle it without glitching out, but then the second explorer got its revenge, who I took out with this plant-footed chomper, and the final wave didn't send too many zombies, so it was really easily beat. Day 17 was one of the glitch levels in which there's supposed to be a 14 plant limit, but it's broken, so the limit's actually non-existent, and I can use as many chompers as I really want to. But instead, I tried to beat this level with as little chompers as possible. As more and more explorers were being sent, this started to become more difficult, but thankfully I had enough sun and plant food to take care of all these explorers. In the end, beating day 17 with only 5 chompers. Day 18, I prepped some defenses, and I placed them all in this kind of staggered placement for the sandstorms that were being sent in, but later on I realized there's a strategy that's a little bit better for the chompers. And even though we lost most of the chompers that were very up front, we still beat day 18. Day 19 had 2 columns of mold colonies in the back, and also a 16 plant limit. And these 5 chompers were doing pretty well by themselves, until this explorer came in and took one of them out, and then also the second one. But thankfully the third one was able to swallow it whole. But then a little bit later on, the game sent a beast of an explorer, who took out this first chomper, the second chomper, the third chomper, and the fourth one, leaving me no space to beat it because of the mold colonies. But thankfully, we still had the lawnmower to beat it. Also, beating day 19. Day 20 is a level I was worried about, because I remember it pretty vividly from the Torchwood challenge. It's a nice level because it gives us a lot of sunflowers, but then also sends a lot of explorer zombies. And this first one took out 2 chompers, but thankfully the third in line was able to eat it. And then another explorer came in, burning the first chomper and also the second chomper, but this third one I planted, plant fooded, and ate it. And the explorer in the bottom was what I was really worried about, but then this chomper also plant fooded, so it worked out in my favor. But then these 2 explorers in the 2 middle lanes were going on a tirade through my chompers, but thankfully I'd been saving plant food for this exact moment. So I used the plant food and took both of them out. And that was day 20. Day 21, we go back to the normal levels. It's supposed to be a level in which the game lets us use twin sunflower, kernel pull, and melon pull, but as we can only use chomper, they were kind of useless. And the explorer chomper mechanic was getting a little annoying, but there's only a few more levels left, so I was just pushing through. And we beat day 21 with ease. Day 22 had 1 column of mold colonies and then an 18 plant limit. It was kind of just an easier version of that previous level with the 16 plant limit and 2 mold colonies. They should honestly probably be switched. This level didn't even have any explorer zombies. They should definitely be switched. And with my army of chompers, day 22 was very easily beat. Day 23, I started placing my chompers pretty early on to take care of these front gravestones. But then these 2 explorers in the outer lanes had to ruin the fun. But as I planted a couple more chompers in the back, I was able to get my revenge. There was also a couple tomb raisers raising graves in the same places I had just taken the graves down from, but they were beaten easily and we bit down the graves again. But then the final wave sends a gargantuar, who I thought was about to tear through the chompers because the chompers can't swallow him. But then this chomper plant fooded and kind of just took him out, beating day 23. Day 24, I prepped some defenses. Again, I used a stagger strategy with 2 columns of space between the chompers. Again, the explorers were being a little annoying, but we were able to beat them before they got too far. And that was all of ancient Egypt with just a max level chomper. Next up, the Pirate Seas. Day 1 of Pirate Seas starts off and nothing really special happens. I plant all 5 of my chompers down and they're easily able to take care of all of day 1. Day 2 sends in a seagull zombie who is sucked in by the chomper's plant food, and then another horde of 4 seagull zombies are sent who make the chomper full. And because of this, the chomper almost gets eaten by these 2 other seagulls. But as it prevails, we beat day 2. Day 3 has the same exact setup as day 1, so my chopper formation also ends up being the exact same. But this chomper in the bottom lane gets overwhelmed by all these zombies and ends up actually getting eaten. So I have to plant another one in that lane. But with that, we beat day 3. Day 4 starts with me placing the 2 chompers up front, and the stakes started to rise just a little bit because this level had 2 flags instead of 1. This chomper in the top middle lane ended up dying, but I placed another one few lanes back to take care of the incoming zombies. And as the strongest zombies being sent were still bucket heads, day 4 was still beat very easily. Day 5 had 2 ground lanes and 3 flying/swinging zombie lanes. And these 5 chompers were doing good for the most part, but then the bottom middle chomper got full and eaten by the conehead, who I ended up replacing. But right after, the swashbuckler got eaten by the bottom chomper, which made the bottom chomper full, and then the seagull ended up eating that chomper. But then the chomper I placed to replace it ended up plant fooding, taking him out. The bottom middle lane was getting a little overcrowded, so I placed another chomper behind the one that was already placed, and I placed a couple more reinforcements in the upper lanes, but as I didn't have enough sun for that top lane, that chomper got eaten. But as soon as that sun came down, I placed a chomper to take out that seagull zombie. And with that, we beat day 5. Day 6 had the same exact layout as day 5 with the 2 ground lanes and 3 water lanes. And I got all the placements right up front besides this bottom lane because I didn't have enough sun when the zombie came in. Day 6 also had something a little different. Swashbuckler zombies in the 2 ground lanes. So I had to quickly plant chompers there. But I didn't have enough sun for this bottom middle lane. But right as I got enough sun to do it, I noticed that the top lane was also empty because the chomper there got eaten. So I had to sacrifice this bottom middle lane to the lawnmowers. And a little later, even though we had 2 chompers in the bottom middle lane, I placed another one just in case there was another raiding party with the swashbucklers. And as predicted, they showed up. But as we were prepared, day 6 was easily beaten. Day 7 was a little more lenient on the board setup with 3 ground lanes and 2 water lanes. But day 7 also introduced the barrel roller zombie, who can't be swallowed but can be taken down by being bitten twice. And the barrel itself isn't the annoying part, it's the imps that come out of it later on, like these 2 who I had to prep extra defenses for just because that one chomper couldn't take care of them. The top middle chomper looked like it was about to get overwhelmed, so I ended up plant fooding it, which took out all the zombies but blew back the barrel. And then I placed a chomper right by it just to eat it. And as the final wave of day 7 approached, we saw maybe the most zombies we've seen so far. And this bottom middle chomper's plant food ability ended up being bad because the barrel blew up and one of the imps made it all the way to the lawnmower. But thankfully the lawnmower took out some very pesky zombies that were approaching. Now with only 1 seagull and 2 normal zombies left, day 7 was beat. Day 9 we went back to the 2 ground lane and 3 water lane combo, with the 2 ground lanes being more up top. The game then sent these 3 swashbucklers in the bottom 3 lanes, but I kind of panicked because I thought they also sent them in the top lanes. But as they didn't, it served as a good reminder, and I placed 2 chompers in the top 2 lanes. And we almost beat this level without losing any chompers, but the top 2 lanes got eaten by the 2 coneheads. But as these were the last 2 zombies, we beat day 9. Day 10, again, 2 ground lanes and 3 water lanes. But this time, the level had 3 flags. And I placed the ground lane chompers just 1 lane back from normal, because I wanted to stall, but not stall too hard. And again, I prepped for the swashbucklers in the ground lanes and placed 2 chompers in the back. Day 10 also introduced the imp cannons. Their launching mechanism isn't really the scary part about them, but in reality, it's the number of imps that get launched when the cannon blows up. And as the chompers can never hit the cannon itself, it's bound to blow up. Day 10 was easy, but I'm scared of day 22. Day 11, again, 2 ground and 3 water. PopCap really loved this level design. It's also sad seeing me place down the chompers and them just getting plant fooded right away, but hit nothing. But this insta plant food effect becomes very handy much later on. The first big wave came with a lot of zombies that took out my front 2 chompers. But as the barrel approached the back chomper, I plant fooded it, later replacing the 2 previously taken out chompers. But then one of them got destroyed again, forcing me to plant food the chomper that was behind it. And in the final wave, there were a lot of zombies being sent in, but we had enough defenses prepped to take them all out. Day 14, I prepped defenses, and some of the front chompers were still getting taken out, but as I had a lot of spare sun, I tried to replace them. And beating these last 2 seagull zombies, day 14 was beat. Day 15 has this 3-peater that we quickly shovel, and we are tasked to protect the flowers in the back from being trampled on. We do this by placing some chompers up front, and then as the level progressed, we placed 5 more chompers in a farther back column closer to the flowers. And with these 2 solid columns, the mid game was beat pretty easily, and then the final flag took out this one bottom middle chomper, but the one behind it was able to handle business. business. And after defeating the imp cannon imps, we're able to beat day 15. Day 16, we have to protect these spring beans in the middle lanes. And this is one of my favorite protect the endangered plant levels because we're actually protecting something that isn't good. Because sometimes the endangered plants end up being like sunflowers or a plant that's actually just good. So the level ends up not really being even a challenge. But this one I consider a challenge. And I went for a pretty risky play this level that ended up turning into a combo with the Chomper sucking in the zombies and then the spring bean launching the barrel, which I thought was pretty cool. Things got a little scary here, but then I quickly placed the Chomper and plant fooded it, which took care of this lane, but then the top lane got a little scary as well, so I had to plant food the spring bean. And with the final wave zombies, I used plant foods on the chompers, which put a buffer on the zombies, making them much easier to deal with. And with that, we beat day 16. Day 17, the special challenge is beating a certain amount of zombies in a certain amount of time. And this can end up being a little scary because the chomper is a very short-ranged attacker. This short range is especially scary for Pirate Seas because of the water lanes and the chompers having to wait for the zombies to fly to them. But thankfully, this level has a raiding party sending a lot of zombies at once, including the barrel roller zombies, which are perfect for this challenge because they include the 2 imps within the barrel. And with these, the challenge expectations were met. And now all that was left was beating the final wave. And with only the imp cannons left, day 17 was beat. Here it was, day 22, the level I was scared of. But before we start it, let's prep some defenses. If you're unfamiliar with day 22, it's a level that sends in a lot of imp with imp cannons. It started off really slow with just 1 imp cannon, but then a couple seconds later added 2 more. And a little more later, every lane was filled with an imp cannon. But it gets even worse, because I don't know if you can tell, but the imp cannons have more imp cannons underneath them. It's like 2 or 3 imp cannons per lane, and they end up splooging all over the chompers. But very surprisingly, the chompers were keeping up with the imps. We'd lose a chomper here and there, but it wasn't too big of a deal. But then this last wave kind of caught me off guard with all the imps eating a lot of my chompers. But thankfully, our very last chompers were able to beat these 2 chimps and beat day 22. Day 23 was a double threat of challenges, with us having to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and also having to destroy a certain amount of zombies in a certain amount of time. I love when the flowers are in the middle of the tile and you can just plant a plant on top of them. And most of you already probably know this, but it's even cooler when spike weeds or spike rocks are allowed, because you can plant those on top of the flowers and then the zombies just walk over them without trampling the flowers. But sadly, as we can only use chompers, this wasn't a possibility for us. I had all these chompers defending the flowers, but I was getting a little worried about the other challenge because the zombies were being sent at a very slow pace, and I'd get very close to beating that challenge, but then it'd all go away within seconds. But thankfully, this last wave sent just enough zombies that all the chompers were able to beat them in a very short amount of time and complete the challenge, beating day 23. Day 24 again is a protect the spring bean level, and this is the harder version of that original one because these are in front of the water tiles. Though the water tiles send less zombies, this is still more difficult because we can't place chompers in front of the spring beans. Thankfully, the seagulls aren't too much of a danger because the spring beans just duck down when they're coming close. The main problem comes in when the swashbucklers trigger the spring bean and the spring bean falls asleep, making them very vulnerable to the seagull zombies. But thankfully, the spring bean at the bottom woke up at the perfect time. There were a few close calls leading up to the final flag, but nothing the chompers couldn't handle. And as the final wave was approaching, I'd meticulously saved up 4 plant food just for any dangerous situations that would come up. And I ended up using some plant food on the spring beans because there were too many imps. But with that, all of Pirate Seas was beat. Next up, the Wild West. The Wild West is where things start heating up a little bit with the introduction of tracks that block a lot of the lanes and also some very strong zombies that get very annoying. The first level doesn't really include these zombies, so I end up placing the chompers very up front just to make the level go by a little faster. And with the second column of chompers being planted and the final wave only having about 10 zombies in total, day 1 was beat very easily. Day 2 only has 1 flag and blocks about 5 tiles in total, so the challenges weren't too difficult. It also introduces the joke of the Wild West, the dynamite zombie. Does the dynamite zombie remind anyone of Dynamite from Brawl Stars? I don't know why, but the resemblance is there. But as the last wave was sent with these measly zombies, and the very last zombie being the dynamite zombie, who dies automatically since it's the last zombie and it's not approaching the house, beating day 2. Day 3, again, 1 flag, but this time there's 6 tiles being blocked by the tracks, which again isn't a threat, but it introduces the piano zombie, who can be a little threat to the chomper because it can't be swallowed, but thankfully 2 chomps from the Chomper are enough to beat it. And the level was sending a decent amount of zombies, making some of my Chompers full, but they were kinda spaced out, becoming not much of a threat. And with this, we beat day 3. Day 5 ups the ante a little bit with 2 flags. And I think the zombies introduced in this level are supposed to be these guys with the metal things under their vests, but as they get one shot, they're not too big of a deal either. This dynamite zombie was a little annoying because it was able to hop over my chompers at the last second, making it behind the defenses, but I quickly placed a chomper to get rid of it, again in the top lane as well. And this is the perfect time to tell you the new strategy that I implemented with the chompers. And it was the back-to-back placement that you're seeing in the front lanes. The main problem with the chompers was that they'd get full and then they just get eaten because there's nothing to defend them. And if you look in the top lane, that front chomper is full while that back chomper isn't. So the back chomper is able to eat the zombies while the front one digests the other ones. And with the strategy, we didn't lose any of the chompers, beating day 5. Day 6 was a prepare your defenses level. And for some reason I only planted a few chompers, but quickly realizing this mistake, I added another column behind them. And they're holding up pretty well until this piano at the bottom came into play that took out that front chomper right away. But as I had 1,000 sun in the bank, I replaced that one and then also the one that was taken out in the top middle lane. And with that, day 6 was beat. Day 7 has 2 flags and 2 full columns blocked by the tracks. But still, as the annoying zombies hadn't come in yet, I was still placing the choppers very up front. I couldn't really make do with the back-to-back chomper strategy this time because of the railroad track, so this time I had to make do with the staggered one. But this time the final wave didn't have too many zombies, so it was dealt with pretty easily. Day 10 starts off with my first chomper swallowing some H2O, but then a zombie to save its dignity. But then this middle lane chomper also sells because it plant foods but doesn't suck in the zombie for some reason. And this fourth chomper. A lot of selling happening. I was thinking, what could the reason for this be? What was making him so scared? And then it came in, the chicken wrangler zombie, who I personally thought would be the run ender. But it just got swallowed whole. No chickens to show or nothing. And I thought this might have been a mistake, so I wanted to see what would happen with this bottom one. And it was the same exact thing. With this new discovery, a big stress factor was released. The run was saved as the chicken wranglers were deemed useless, and we beat day 10. Day 11 was actually pretty scary to start off, because we're only allowed to spend 500 sun. And although the chomper is max level, 75 sun is still a lot. Meaning I can only have 1 full column of chompers, and then 1 extra for backup if needed. But as the level had already progressed halfway, I was starting to realize why there's only a 500 sun limit. And that's because the amount of zombies sent this level are very minimal. And it was beat entirely with just these 5 chompers. Day 13 had 2 flags and 2 full columns that were blocked by tracks. And as we'd previously realized that the chickens weren't too big of a problem, I still planted my chompers very up front. But then the second menace of the Wild West entered, the bull. Who the bull itself isn't a problem, but the imp that it launches is. Because it forces me to place extra chompers just to get rid of it. And this can become a problem if too many bulls are sent at once and I don't have enough sun to defend the imps. But thankfully only like 1 bull at a time was being sent, so I was able to deal with the imps pretty easily. And as the last wave didn't have any bulls being sent, it was beat very easily. Day 14 had no special challenges, 2 flags, and 2 columns and 1 tile blocked by railroad tracks. Again, I planted a column of chompers up front to take care of the slowly approaching zombies, and then started planting a layer of chompers in the back just in case any bulls were being sent later on. One of the chompers in the back sucked in the chicken wrangler, but then in that same lane, a problem occurred. The chomper was eaten, and then a chicken wrangler was sent right after. And I thought, oh, I could just place the chomper on top of it to take care of it. But then this happened. Yeah, this wasn't a mechanic I was familiar with, that if the plant touches the chicken wrangler, it lets out all the chickens. And because of this, I ended up losing one of the lawnmowers. And this was kind of bad because it left that middle lane very vulnerable, and I didn't have a lot of sun to just overprotect it. And everything was going well until the last wave, which sent in a ton of chicken wrangler zombies. And if you look in that bottom middle lane, in the front, the chomper is digesting the previous zombies, which leads to the chicken wrangler touching it. And this had me a little afraid, but thankfully the plant food was able to deal with most of the chickens, and with only the top lane zombie left, we beat day 14. After day 14's semi-scariness, day 15 was also a little scary because we could only lose 2 plants in total. And I haven't been mentioning it too much, but we usually lose about 4 to 5 chompers every level. So this had me terrified, especially because there were piano zombies and if there were any chickens, that would be even worse. And I don't know if I was just testing the waters of the level, but I was completely forgetting to use the back-to-back chomper strategy, even though I had a pretty good amount of sun. But surprisingly, as the final wave came in, I realized that this level only had 2 piano zombies and no chicken wranglers, so it ended up being pretty easy. Day 16, we're tasked to protect this walnut that's placed on a minecart, so I placed a chomper right behind it to start off, and as I collected enough sun, I filled the rest of the column with more chompers. And the zombies were still getting hits off on the walnut, so I decided to place a column of chompers in front of the walnut as well. And this was ensuring that I was taking the least amount of damage possible. I placed a chomper in the back for a dynamite that had hopped over. The final flag sent in a decent amount of zombies, but our chompers were enough to defeat all of them. Day 17, we're tasked to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and it's not too bad because the flowers are pretty centered instead of being up front. And for a while, I just let these chompers handle business while I collected sun for any future threats. And as we're approaching the first flag, I started to place the second column of chompers, making the back-to-back combo. I also placed a chomper in the back to prepare for this bull, but it plant fooded and sucked in the bull. But something weird happened and the bull ended up triggering the lawnmower, so it just took it. This was my first time seeing this glitch happen. I'm guessing the main reason was the big hitbox of the bull. And everything was going pretty normally after this. No problems, no nothing. And then something really weird happened out of nowhere. I placed the chomper in the very middle lane just for extra defenses, and it plant fooded and sucked in the zombie. But for some reason, that counted as the zombie trampling the flowers. I mean, it technically makes sense, but it's weird that it didn't do that when the bull was being sucked in as well. But this is something that could be easily worked around, so I jumped into the level one more time. And this time, I decided to place a column of chompers one lane back from the very front. And this actually ends up working out perfectly because it makes it so that the bull doesn't launch the imp at all. I placed a column of chompers right in front of the flowers as well, but as the chompers up front were just taking the bulls before they could do anything, this level actually ended up being really easy. Day 18, I prepped some defenses. And this time, I remembered to do the back-to-back combo. I also decided to save 400 sun just in case some chompers got eaten. And thank God I did, because a lot of my chompers up front started to get eaten. And I didn't even notice, but there was these chickens in the bottom lane that ended up taking a lawnmower, which took out another chicken wrangler, making more chickens. So I planted a chomper to try to deal with these, but I saw that it was about to get eaten, so I had to place another one in its place. And thankfully that second chomper was enough to take out all the chickens. And thankfully this chomper plant fooded as well, taking out the chicken wrangler that would have been a problem. But then also a dynamite launched behind the chomper, and I thought I was cooked. But then it reached the chomper, and the chomper just ate it, which was pretty cool, because I didn't know it could do that. But then something very unexpected happened, because I had all my lawnmowers that I thought would take care of everything. And they did, but then there was a hidden chicken wrangler that died and released more chickens after the lawnmower already went past, making me lose. And this time, my strategy was 3 back-to-back chompers. I didn't know if it was going to work, but it was worth a shot. And we're already about halfway through the level, and it was working pretty well, taking out all the zombies, and we hadn't even lost a single chomper yet. But then a couple seconds later, I lost 2 back-to-back chompers in that bottom lane. I tried protecting that last one with the plant food, which worked for a little bit, but then the chomper above it got eaten and the chickens got through to the lawnmower. And then you can see the replacement chomper had about 1 million chickens on it. And any chomper I placed would just get eaten right away, and the chickens once again reached the end. My third strategy was again the triple back-to-back chompers, but this time they were all 1 lane back. This would allow the front chompers to have more time to digest the zombies they had just eaten. And this time we made it about 70% through the level before losing a single chomper. But as the final flag was about to be sent in, 2 of the chicken wranglers reached my chompers, causing havoc, taking out most of them, and even reaching that top lane lawnmower. And then the middle lawnmower as well right after. And honestly, I thought I was done for. But as things calmed down a little bit, I realized that there's still a chance that I could win this. So I bought a plant food and plant fooded this chomper just so that the chicken wrangler wouldn't reach him. And then I planted another chomper and plant fooded as well, just so that top chicken wrangler wouldn't reach him, causing the chickens to not spawn at all. That was basically it, because all that was left was a dynamite, and as he couldn't really do anything by himself, he just committed self-beheading. And that was all of day 18. But then day 19 also had some challenges of its own. The 2000 sun limit wasn't too big of a deal, but the main challenge was me not being allowed to lose more than 2 chompers. And as you saw last level, the chompers are pretty fragile and can be eaten through pretty easily. Pretty ironic if you ask me. As the first big wave was sent, I had a back-to-back chomper combo setup, and as more and more zombies were being sent, I realized that this level was only sending non-threatening zombies. So this was a breath of fresh air, and day 19 was very easily beat. Day 21 was another protect the flowers from being trampled on level with a limit of 1750 sun. So as expected, I started off by placing chompers right in front of the flowers, and then later on did a little staggered placement and placed another column of chompers 2 lanes ahead. And as this level only had 1 flag, it was beat pretty easily. And then day 23 was the scariest combo possible, with flowers that couldn't be trampled on and also a 2 plant losing limit. And again, I placed a column of chompers right in front of the flowers just for some protection, and then again some staggered chompers for some extra defenses. And as the first big wave of zombies was coming in, I added another column of chompers in between the 2 that already existed, making it into a triple back-to-back chomper combo. And this was heavily needed because you can see that this level had chicken wranglers. And this strategy held up incredibly until we got to that last flag, where I couldn't be too dependent on the chompers themselves, so I ended up just spamming plant food to get rid of the chicken wranglers, beating day 23. Day 24, we have to protect these walnuts, and I quickly move them all to that middle lane so they're easier to manage. As the middle zombie came in, I realized I was going to have to maneuver these walnuts a lot since the chompers don't really have range. And this becomes an even bigger problem when the chicken wranglers come in, because if the walnut even happens to touch the chicken wrangler, it'll release all the chickens, basically giving the zombies a free win against us. And I was doing pretty well maneuvering the walnuts when the chicken wranglers would come in, but then this top walnut started getting eaten by this zombie. So I tried to quickly maneuver it downwards, thinking maybe it would just teleport across from that chicken wrangler, but that didn't work, so it released all the chickens. And as the upper half chompers were getting munched on, I lost track of the chickens on that walnut in that bottom lane, and they took out that walnut, making me lose on this first attempt. So I went into the level with the same exact strategy in mind, because the strategy itself wasn't flawed, it was just that I made that one mistake with the walnut maneuvering. So I decided to be a little bit more careful this time. And I did pretty well maneuvering the walnuts at the right times against that last level that beat us. And I did pretty well plant fooding the top chomper, but completely messed up the bottom one. So it actually let out some chickens, but I didn't panic too much, and we actually ended up surviving this chicken horde. And now with some pretty solid defenses set up, all I had to do was not mess up going against the chicken wranglers. And as the last flag set in literally the 2 menaces of this world, things got pretty scary. But somehow the chompers were able to take them down without a problem, and we beat all of Wild West. Next up, the Frostbite Caves. Before even starting Frostbite Caves, I knew this one was going to be really interesting because Chomper would be the first plant that we've tested out at max level that would actually struggle against the ice mechanic of Frostbite Caves. Potato Mine didn't really struggle too much because it would just explode right away, not even giving the ice a chance. The pea shooter and the cabbage pulse range and plant food abilities were enough to beat the ice. And then of course the torchwood just has the heating ability within where it can't be frozen at all. But Chomper has neither the exploding, range, or heating ability of those plants. All it's capable of doing is unfreezing the plant that's right in front of it. And at some points that might not be enough. But thankfully there isn't any freezing on day 1, so it's beat pretty easily. Day 2 has 3 frozen repeaters and 3 frozen walnuts, and the walnuts we can break, but the 3 repeaters we can't really do much about, so I just leave them alone for this level. One of the walnuts, however, I end up having to break because I needed to place a chomper there so that it could beat the zombies that were approaching. And as there weren't really any freezing winds this level either, we ended up beating it. Day 4 has a clear field with no pre-frozen plants on it, so you know something's about to happen. And something did happen with the introduction of the snowball thrower, who basically instantly froze my chomper right after I planted it. But then I placed a chomper right by it to take care of it. There were a decent amount of zombies being sent this level, but it seemed like there was still no snowstorms, so it was still pretty easy. There's a pretty cool mechanic with the snowball thrower and the back-to-back chomper combo, because when the snowball thrower freezes the chomper, it can't freeze the one behind it, so they kind of get stuck in this infinite loop of freezing, and then breaking. And then the snowball thrower slowly makes its way forward and ends up getting eaten by the Chomper. And because of this mechanic, the snowball thrower wasn't really a threat this level because all the lanes had the back-to-back Chompers, so we won pretty easily. Day 6 had 2 pre-placed frozen sunflowers who would come in handy, but I wanted it to be a challenge, so I just left them untouched. And everything was all in well before the first flag approached. But then a gust of wind froze some of my Chompers. And it still wasn't too bad because we were able to break them free. But then another gust was sent, freezing some of the Chompers that were in the back lane. And this is a problem because the front lane Chompers can't unfreeze the Chompers behind them, even though the ones behind them can freeze the ones that are in front of them. And because of this, slowly but surely, all of my Chompers were basically frozen. But as not too many zombies were sent in this final wave, it was still very doable. And we beat day 6. Day 7 had some frozen imps and some frozen split peas, but we avoid for the most part. In the middle lane, this Chomper got frozen by a snowball thrower, which led to the bucket head and the imps getting pretty far, so I had to place a Chomper and plant food it to take care of these guys. That was basically the only challenging thing of day 7, so it was beat pretty easily. Day 9 had no pre-frozen plants, but it did have 3 flags in it. The dodo zombies were introduced this level, who can be a little annoying because they fly over the rerouting tiles, but we placed a Chomper in the back to take care of it. And the last wave was just a bunch of dodos, so nothing too special, and we beat day 9 without a problem. Day 11 had 4 frozen zombies and also 4 flags. And at first I left the zombies alone, but then I ended up breaking one of them free because I needed a Chomper to be there to take care of the dodo that was flying to it. And this level was getting pretty hectic with the number of zombies that were being sent. So I plant fooded this one Chomper just to dim the numbers down a little bit and send some of them back to the front. And then as a big clump of zombies collected in that bottom tile, I plant fooded another Chomper. And so far, only 3 big waves had been sent in. We still had that 4th flag to go against. But thankfully, the 4th flag focused more on the tankiness of the zombies than the sheer number of zombies. And this was perfect for the Chomper because the health of the zombies doesn't really matter to it. And we beat day 11 without losing any lawnmowers. Day 12, I prepped some defenses. And I ended up going with the staggered strategy because the tiles were in the way, and also saved 775 sun just for when the snowstorms froze my Chompers. And when the snowstorms did freeze my Chompers, I'd place the Chompers behind the frozen things and try to unfreeze them. But then this happened, where the snowstorm froze basically all of my Chompers at once. But thankfully this was the last big snowstorm of this level, so I was able to place a column of Chompers in the back, unfreezing another column of Chompers, creating a back-to-back Chomper combo, which helped me defeat the final wave of day 12. Day 13 were hit with the Wild West classic of saving flowers from being trampled on, but the game developers were very nice on this level, placing the flowers in the very back. And then I realized the sole reason the flowers were in the back was to introduce these snowstorm zombies that came in with the tornadoes. And one of them almost reached the flowers, but then I collected the sun and quickly planted my Chomper before it could take the steps on the flowers. And as I was made aware of these snowstorms, I heavy protected the middle 3 lanes. And it was only the middle 3 lanes that I heavy protected because the other outer layers had the 2 rerouting tiles on them. So the zombies couldn't really reach the flowers in those lanes until this Gargantuar showed up, catching me very off guard. And then I plant fooded my Chomper, which did a lot of damage, but it caused the Gargantuar to throw all 3 of its imps into that back 3rd lane. So I had to quickly place a Chomper to take care of those imps. And the Gargantuar was taken care of by those front Chompers, and now all that was left was these 2 imps and the 1 ice block head zombie. And these 3 of course were beaten with ease, beating day 13. Day 15 again had a devastating 4 flags on it, but thankfully they had some pepper pults that kept my Chompers unfrozen for the most part. Now I don't really like pepper pult, but it is really helpful in this challenge. The only lane we really have to worry about is that middle one because there really isn't any heat protecting it, and as a lot of the Chompers in that lane were getting frozen, I just kept placing more and more and it was working out. And as the final wave was being sent in, we already had a pretty hefty amount of Chompers laid down, so it's gonna be pretty easy to beat. And now with only 3 snowball throwers left, I plant fooded one of the Chompers and then the second one to beat day 15. Day 17 had some frozen charred guards and some frozen fume shrooms with 2 flags. And then this level introduced probably the most annoying zombie of the Frostbite Caves. the caveman pusher zombie. The caveman itself isn't annoying, but it's the 3 imps that it brings in with it. It just creates a big crowd, and the Chomper doesn't really like big crowds of zombies. But this level in itself wasn't too difficult, as the final wave only sent about 10 to 15 zombies, so it was beat pretty easily. Day 19 teased us with 2 twin sunflowers in the back who we couldn't even do anything with, and I placed a column of chompers in that 3rd tile to start off, but as some of them got frozen, I had to start placing chompers behind them. But then came in the annoying caveman pushers who were just pushing all the imps and chompers that were frozen forward, so I waited for them to push them and then placed a chomper to get rid of the caveman itself so it could stop pushing. And you can see here why I said the caveman was the most annoying. It basically just fills up the whole map with these imps. So I kind of just gave up on that top middle lane and used the lawnmower to take it out. And with that, I beat day 19. Day 20, no frozen plants, just 3 rerouting tiles and 3 flags. And I placed my chompers very up front this time, but they were just instantly getting frozen, which was a problem. And this was very panic inducing because I was running out of chompers and sun very rapidly. I caught these dodos, this buckethead, and these top 3 middle zombies at the last second with this chomper. And the back 5 tiles of that top lane were basically cooked forever until the level was beaten. But thankfully what we're seeing here was the final wave. So I actually ended up beating it even though it seemed like a mess. Day 22 had 3 frozen guacadiles and 2 big waves. And it was seeming pretty easy to start off. But then they sent in a weasel zombie, giving me flashbacks to the Wild West. And I didn't notice that the chomper was chewing, so the weasel zombie actually ended up touching it. But for some reason, unlike the chicken wrangler in the Wild West, the weasel zombie doesn't release its weasels when it touches the chompers. And this was a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders because it made going against these guys very easy. And because of this, even though the final wave sent all these weasel hoarder zombies, they were beat without losing a single lawnmower. And now we just had this one snowball thrower to deal with, and of course he was annihilated very quickly. Day 23 had these chard guard in the back that we had to protect alongside 3 frozen twin sunflowers. And even though I've played this level many times, I completely forgot that the snowstorm zombies are sent right onto the chard guards, and I was completely unprepared when they were sent, and I could only place 1 chomper, and I placed it right behind the twin sunflower because even though I shovel the twin sunflowers as fast as I can, the twin sunflowers end up producing sun right as they break out of the ice. And this leads to me having enough sun to defend the chard guards from the zombies because the twin sunflower produces sun, but then the shoveling of the twin sunflower gives me even more sun. There were a couple annoying zombies being sent in with the sandstorms that actually made that bottom middle chard guard lose all of its flaps. But as the final wave came in, I realized that that was the last sandstorm and used my plant food to get rid of the final zombies, completing day 23. Day 26, again, the game teases me with 2 sun shrooms in the back that I can't do anything about. And day 26 had 4 flags in total. The weasel hoarders, of course, we don't touch because we don't want any problems. As the second big wave was being sent in, everything seemed to be going fine, but then out of nowhere, a snowstorm froze like half of my chompers. But thankfully, with the minimal amount of zombies on screen, this wasn't too big of a problem right now. But then a snowstorm after the 3rd flag froze most of my chompers again, and this time it was a bigger problem because there's so many chompers frozen on screen. And I got most of them unfrozen, but that top middle lane was a little cooked because I couldn't really place any chompers to unfreeze the other ones, but thankfully there were 2 redirection pads on that lane so the zombies wouldn't really get to the end of it. And with that, day 26 was beat. Day 27 of the Frostbite Caves is one of my favorite levels in this world because we have to protect these 3 rutabagas and there's 4 flags. But my favorite part is that there's no sandstorms and it's basically just straight hands between the plants and the zombies. And this meant I could place as many chompers as I wanted without having to worry about any strategy. But then a crazy amount of cavemans were sent in at once, kind of reversing my mindless strategy of placing the chompers anywhere. So I started being a little bit more careful with my placements, even taking out this gargantuar. And even though the caveman ice imps were getting crazy, we were still pushing through. And things got a little scary with the gargantuar in the middle lane that threw its imp at the rutabaga, but thankfully I was able to place a chomper that plant fooded and it tanked the damage while the rutabaga took care of the imp. And now basically with only these yeti imps left, I plant fooded this rutabaga to take care of the bottom 2, and then I tried placing a chomper for the top 2, but they're actually defeated normally by the other rutabaga. And with that, we beat day 27. Day 28 is the last level of Frostbite Caves and we prepped some defenses. I only placed 2 columns of chompers and they were very spread out just to kind of test the waters of the snowstorms that were going to happen later on. And thankfully this worked out because this level sent snowball throwers and snowstorms, and I was able to place chompers behind the frozen ones to unfreeze them. And with the first and final flag of day 28 being sent in, I had a crazy army of chompers set up for the zombies, and they stood no chance. And we beat day 28 with ease, and that was all of Frostbite Caves. Next up, Lost City. Day 1 of Lost City starts, and I was honestly expecting Lost City to be the easiest world because of these gold tiles. Because the biggest thing that was going against the Chomper was the sun. It was a 75 sun cost plant with a 3-second recharge. And if we had enough sun, we could just fill up the entire map with a bunch of Chompers. And you can see it was only day 1 and we had a bunch of Chompers down. And even with all these Chompers down, we still had about 600 sun in the bank. And because of this, day 1 was beat very easily. Day 2 pre-places these 3 red stingers as a means to show it off, but instead I just shovel all 3 of them and take the sun instead. This helps me get some chompers down pretty quickly in the front, but then these parachute zombies are sent down, which reminded me that I was going to have to start placing chompers in the back for these guys as well. They're kind of like the bulls from the Wild West where we had to prepare for them in advance. And as we took care of this final flag pretty easily, we only had these 2 zombies left at the end, and this chomper that I planted in the back was able to take care of them and beat day 2. Day 4, we're given this walnut in the middle for some reason, who I shovel right after placing a chomper, and then I filled that column with chompers and then started another column 2 tiles back. And that second column was for the parachute zombies. I was going to do a back-to-back combo by placing chompers in that middle column, but it wasn't really needed this level, so we beat day 4. Day 6 had 5 gold tiles, so I planted my first chomper on one of them in the middle, and then after planting a second chomper in a gold tile, I planted a column of chompers from the lane second farthest up. And this was because I knew it was going to be easy and I just wanted to get the level done as fast as possible. And as I predicted, the last wave was sent with a bunch of measly zombies who we beat very easily. Day 6 only provides us with 3 gold tiles, so I quickly plant a chomper on one of them, and then again plant chompers in that second column from the front. We see some shovel and umbrella zombies this level who can normally be very annoying, but they aren't very annoying to the chomper, so they're just like normal zombies. And with the final wave, even though my front lane was very much taken out, the back lane was able to handle all the zombies, beating day 7. Day 10 thankfully had a couple more gold tiles than the last level, so we quickly made use of them by planting 3 chompers on top of them. And then again that front column to take out the incoming zombies quickly. Later planting some chompers in the back for the parachute zombies that were being sent in. And the last flag had a pretty decent amount of zombies being sent in, but mostly were in that top lane, so I did the back-to-back combo with the chompers. They were able to easily take them all out, beating day 10. Day 11 again provided us with 5 gold tiles, which was more than enough to sustain us on sun, and this was because anything over the number of 3 gold tiles was enough for us to keep on continuously planting the chompers. Again, I used that strategy of the front chompers to take out the zombies really fast, so the next waves were sent faster. And this time we had all those chompers on the gold tiles to take care of the parachute zombies. And as nothing dangerous was sent this level, day 11 was beat pretty fast. Day 15 we have to protect one of my favorite plants, the key, in the bottom and top lane. And I place a column of chompers in that third lane from the front and 2 chompers in the back for some sun production. I then added a second column of chompers 2 lanes back from those front ones just in case. I also added a third chomper in the back for some more sun production. And with these defenses we're able to take out all of day 15 and protect the key. Day 17 provided us with 6 gold tiles, which was a pretty hefty amount, and I placed 3 chompers and 3 gold tiles and then made a column in that front lane, slowly adding a second column in the back for the parachute zombies as the second flag had approached. This dragonfly zombie also made it over that first chomper because the first chomper was digesting a zombie, so that second chomper had to take care of it. That bottom middle tent zombie also thought it was going to do something, but the chomper got to it before it could place its tent. And with this being the last zombie left on day 17, it was beat. Day 19 gave us 8 gold tiles, which was very generous, so I quickly made use of 3 of them, and then I made use of 2 more in that middle column. And I almost planted a full column of chompers there, but for some reason I didn't. And in that one tile that was empty was a tile that the game for some reason sent the parachute zombie in. But I quickly caught this and planted a chomper to take care of that parachute zombie. And after this, there's only some dragonflies and that last flag zombie left, and we beat day 19. Day 20, we entered the B2D5 Z Factor map. I think I've made that reference at some point before as well, but it's literally the only thing that comes into my mind every time I enter this level. All these gold tiles are just so unnecessary. But hey, anything that helps me me, I'll take. And with a lot of parachute zombies being sent this level, a lot of the chompers couldn't really be placed neatly, so it got a little weird. And we ended this level with very odd placements of chompers. Day 23 gives us 3 gold tiles to work with and also has 3 flags in it. I quickly make use of 4 gold tiles just to give us that sustainable sun. And I did this because I knew that this level was about to send in a Gargantuar and a bunch of Indiana Jones. The Gargantuar actually got pretty far before I planted a chomper and it got plant fooded, which ended up beating it. Otherwise, we might have been a little reliant on the lawnmower to take care of it. And all the other lanes were fine, but that middle lane was just packed with zombies for some reason. And later I realized it's because the tent had been placed down in one of the gold tiles. And as all the Indiana Jones were being taken care of by the chompers that I'd already placed, I planted another chomper right by the tent just to take care of it, but it got eaten. So once the level calmed down a little bit and it was only the tent left, I placed another chomper in front of the tent to get rid of it. And with this, I beat day 23. Day 24 provided us with 8 gold tiles, but also the special challenge of not letting the zombies trample on these flowers. And I knew the game was somehow tricking me by planting the flowers all the way in the back, and then when the Indiana Jones came in, I realized why. These parachute zombies were also a nuisance, so I quickly planted some chompers that would take care of them. And then, as I couldn't take any risks, I completed the full column of chompers just for these incoming Indiana Jones. And these 2 columns of chompers were basically enough to take care of the rest of day 24. I had to plant food to take care of this last imp because that chomper was digesting the zombie, and we beat day 24. Day 25 gave us 4 gold tiles to work with, which was still enough to sustain us with the sun. And it only had 2 flags, so it started to seem a little too easy. And I thought there would be some gimmick that would come in and kind of cause havoc, but when the first flag was sent in, nothing too special happened. So I thought maybe the second flag would have something. But the second flag literally had like 6 zombies in total. This might have been one of the easiest levels in the entirety of Lost City. Day 26, things were a little different because they only provided us with 1 gold tile. So I pretty quickly got down the front column of chompers, but I was a little slow for the back column as I didn't have enough sun. But over time, I got enough to plant them down as well. And these defenses were basically enough to take care of all of day 26, and we beat it. Day 27 provided us with 3 gold tiles. I would have preferred 4, but I can't be too greedy, so 3 is still enough. So I quickly made use of them, placing 3 chompers on them, and then a full column of chompers in that 3rd column. But then this level introduced the worst zombie of Lost City, the turquoise skull zombie, who's a ranged attacker who powers up its skull and kamehamehas my chompers without fail. So when these guys came in, I had to place a special chomper just to take them out. All the other zombies weren't much trouble, but when these guys came in, I ended up losing a couple chompers every time. And this top middle one was kind of a menace, making way for this bucket head. So I had to plant an extra chomper just to take this bucket head out and beat day 27. Day 29, the game went back to being generous and giving us 5 gold tiles to work with, which I was very thankful for, so I quickly planted chompers on all 5 of them, and then planted all the chompers in that 2nd column. And I almost lost a lawnmower to the Indiana Jones in that bottom lane, but I quickly caught it and placed a chomper as fast as I could. Now the only threats left were all the Gargs being sent in. The middle one was destroyed with this chomper's plant food, and now we only had the ones in that top and middle row, which the bottom one survived the plant food at first, but then shortly after was taken out with 1 bite. But the top Gargantuar had a turquoise skull supporting it, so I had to place down my chomper and quickly plant food it to take out the turquoise skull, but I actually ended up taking out the Gargantuar as well. And now all that's left was these 2 zombies in this middle lane, so I took out the Indiana Jones with his first chomper, but then the turquoise skull started charging up and I didn't know when it was going to attack, so I let it attack and then placed another chomper to take it out, beating day 29. And here it was, the last level of Lost City, day 30. It's kind of a double-edged sword because it gives us a lot of gold tiles, but then also 3 columns of mold colonies in the back, which heavily limit our chomper placements. And my first move was to plant a column of chompers farthest back as I could, because the normal problem in this level is usually the Indiana Jones, because they sometimes make it too far and get onto the mold colonies where we can't beat them anymore. And even though all the Indiana Jones were beaten very easily, the top lane kind of caught me off guard because the chomper there got full and started digesting zombies, and one of the flyers went right over it, and then the turquoise skull took it out. So the flyer ended up taking a lawnmower. But with that, all of Lost City was beat. Next up, the Far Future. Far Future aesthetically is probably my favorite world. And honestly, it can be pretty easy for most plants to beat this world, but Chomper struggles at some parts of it because Far Future at times is dependent on a lot of zombie spam. Day 1, I planted Chompers in that third column from the front and also 3 Chompers in the back just to utilize the power tiles. And as I plant fooded this Chomper, day 1 was beat. Day 2 had 2 different power tiles, 2 green, 2 yellow that were in the back. And again, I started off by planting the Chompers in that third column from the front, and then another column in the back just in case some jetpacks got over that front column when they're trying to digest the zombies. Day 2 also introduced these Robo Shield guys, but they are very easily beat. Day 3 again has 2 and 2 power tiles just in different combinations, and I tried to beat this entire level with just that front column of Chompers, but then these imp nuisances were sent in, so I was forced to place 2 Chompers in the back to take care of these guys. And with that, day 3 was also beat. Day 4 changed the power tile format a little bit with it being 2 green and 3 yellow, and I just noticed that I refer to the power tiles by their color instead of the shape that's within them. I wonder if there's anyone that calls them by their shapes instead of their colors. Let me know in the comments if you do. But looking back at the game, by the time the first flag had gone by, I had a pretty monstrous lineup going. And this lineup very easily got me to the last flag. And when the final flag came in, I plant fooded the Chompers that were within the power tiles, so they covered every lane. Somehow they missed these guys, so I had to plant food one more time just to take care of them. And with that, day 4 was beat. Day 5 got rid of the yellow power tile and instead added the red and light blue ones. The green and the red power tiles are kind of in awkward positions, so they're not very usable, but the light blue ones can definitely be used. So with the front column, I also planted 3 Chompers and the 3 light blue tiles, later covering the 2 missing tiles as well. And then these 3 Robocone zombies were sent in the perfect tiles for me to plant food the Chompers, but I wanted to see how the Chompers would fare just by themselves without the plant food. And pretty surprisingly, they were able to take them out, beating day 5. Day 7 brought back the yellow power tiles alongside the other 3 in the 2x2x2x2 format, but again, as I didn't really need to stall for sun, I planted that column of Chompers up front just to get the level done faster. Then as usual, the column of Chompers in the back for the safety precaution of the imps being sent in, and they came in handy. And with the final wave just being more imps and Robocone zombies, day 7 was also beat pretty easily. Day 9 had the restriction of 15 plants on the screen, but again it was glitched, but I still tried to abide by the restriction. This level also removed the light blue power tile, making it only the green, red, and yellow ones. The first wave sent in a variety of zombies that were pretty easily defeated, and the final wave seemed even easier than the first wave. And with that, we beat day 9 by only using 11 Chompers. Day 10 replaced the yellow power tiles with the light blue ones, and it also introduced the disco zombie, which was definitely the biggest threat of this world because it could just spawn zombies whenever it wanted to. And this one spawned zombies not twice or 3 times, but 4 times, making it spawn 12 zombies in total. That's a lot of stonks. And then a few seconds later, another one of these was sent. But this time I plant fooded my back lane Chomper and it instantly took it out. And now all that's left was the final wave, which sent in 2 more of them. But these were also in the blue power tower vicinity, which led me to plant fooding them and instantly taking them out as well. And with this flag zombie being the only zombie left, we also beat day 10. Day 11, I prepped some defenses. And I chose to go with the staggered placement. I don't really know why, but this also led to me having an excess of 1625 sun, and I only had to spend 150 of it to beat the entirety of day 11. Day 12 again had the 2x2x2x2 assortment of the power tiles, and it also introduced the Gargantuar of the far future, who I was a little scared of because it can just laser down my Gargantuars from far away, but it decided to completely miss this time, so I was in luck. And my Chompers were able to take it down pretty easily, and then I quickly planted a Chomper in the back for the imp that it launched. This disco bot was also dealt with by a Chomper that I placed and it insta-plant fooded, taking it out. And now we had the final wave to worry about, which sent in 2 Gargantuars. And I used a plant food on both of them, which sucked them in, but then pushed them back. But they both had taken enough damage that one chomp from the Chomper was able to take them down, beating day 12. Day 13 had 3 green power tiles and 2 red ones. And then it also introduced the All-Star mech, which was one of the scarier ones of Far Future as well, because it's just so tanky. but this one Chomper was slowly able to bite it every time it got pushed back, and in 5 bites, it completely took it down. Also, if a Chomper ends up plant fooding against an all-star mech, it completely takes it down, which was pretty good to know for future circumstances, like this one, where I ended up plant fooding these Chompers just to take out these 2 mechs, beating day 13. Day 14, we only had 3 power tiles, the least in a while, and also a 1500 sun limit, but I only had 1 flag, so it's starting to seem like it was one of those levels that seemed scary at first, but then end up being really easy. But then as the last flag approached, it actually kind of caught me off guard because it sent in a lot more zombies than the previous levels I've sent in. And these guys ended up taking out the majority of the front lane Chompers. As we had the backup Chompers, we still beat day 14. On day 15, we're tasked to protect these Citrons, and let's be honest, Citrons don't really need any protection. But the developers obviously understood this, and they just bombard the lanes with constant zombies. And because of the Citron's slow recharge, they aren't completely able to take them out, so we actually do have to plant some Chompers. But the old reliable 2 columns are enough to beat day 15. Day 19 of the far future is one of the easier challenges because it doesn't let us bring any sun producers in, which we don't anyways, but instead gives us these sun bombs that fall from the sky. And this is great for us because this just means we get extra sun for this level. So we quickly got down the front column and started working on that back column. And a third of the way in, our defenses were set up, but with the excess sun, I decided to add another column right in the middle. And this column actually ended up being pretty important because this Gargantuar actually ended up making it pretty far, taking out the front 2 columns. And then right after, a disco bot was sent, but the Chompers were able to deal with it without any casualties. And as the final flag legit only sent in 2 Gargantuars and 1 jetpack zombie, it was extremely easily beat. Day 20, we're tasked to protect these star fruits, and very similarly to the Citrons, these guys don't really need protection. They're pretty well off by themselves. As this is a Chomper video, I decided to mog the star fruits with my Chompers. And in doing this, I completely forgot about the bot swarms and thought I was about to lose a couple lawnmowers. Then I realized I could just plant food the star fruit, and this worked out for one of them, and then the other 2 I planted Chompers for. But then out of nowhere, imps got sent in the outer lanes as well, so I had to use the plant food of the star fruits in those lanes to take them out before they got to the lawnmowers. And after that incident, I planted Chompers in those lanes as fast as I could. And in the final wave, the only problem was the top middle lane with the all-star mech and the shield zombie. But I plant fooded the Chomper in the back to take out the shield zombie, and the all-star mech was dealt with normally, beating day 20. Day 22, defenses were prepped. And this time I decided to go for a double back-to-back combo. Pretty terrifying if you ask me. But then the top lane and the bottom middle lane sent in some tanky zombies where some of them got pushed back, but then the others got eaten. But with the help of plant food, we're able to take care of this problem. And then this Garg that was sent in the top lane was also decimated. And now with only a cone head sent, day 22 was also beat. Day 23 had a 2250 sun limit and a 15 plant limit that again was glitched out. And also it was very generous on the power tile placements, with the red and yellow being kind of perfect. And the final wave tried to send in a crazy swarm of these imps, but I ended up just plant fooding and taking them all out in one go. And with that, we beat day 23. And day 24 was the last level of Far Future, and it was one of the ones that provides us with extra sun. So I got a pretty decent amount of defenses down, with the very excessive amount of sun being at 825. And this level was sending a lot of tanky zombies with these disco bots and all-star mechs, and then even more all-star mechs, but we were able to take them all down without a problem, beating day 24 and the entirety of Far Future. Next up was the Dark Ages. Day 1 of the Dark Ages started, and I do allow Gold Bloom in this world just to supplement sun, because otherwise it would be nearly impossible. And also I had an idea come into mind, because you might be noticing that I'm using my Chompers to take down the sun graves. And I was thinking, how far could I make it just using the sun from the sun graves and not having to rely on the Gold Bloom? I'll be trying to do these levels without Gold Bloom until Gold Bloom's needed, and then I'll bring it back in. The gravestones this level were kind of lined up perfectly in a way that they allowed me to place a Chomper in every single lane, and at the same time still have an extra spare of 225 sun. I then placed a Chomper in front of that sun grave at the front, and this made my spare sun up to 250. This basically meant that I had 3 more Chompers at my disposal. And even though this was level 1, the Dark Ages was sending a pretty good amount of zombies at once. Because look at this final wave, that's a crazy amount of zombies. So as I had some plant food to spare, this was actually not too bad, and we beat night 1. Night 2 also had sun graves graves in some pretty good locations, meaning that I could get a Chomper off in every lane again without the need of a gold bloom. And I was just letting these 5 do their thing for a while, but then the game spawned in some more sun graves right up front and then another grave in that middle area. So of course I took advantage of this and tried to break these. And this level introduced bucket heads, so the final wave had less zombies, but instead they're supposed to be tankier, but again the health doesn't really matter to the Chomper. So this level was technically easier than night 1, and because of that we beat night 2 without the need to use the plant food. And here was night 3, and as you can tell by the layout, there's no sun graves on screen, and sadly this was as far as we get without the gold bloom. I did try to come up with some ideas, like maybe let the lawnmowers take care of the zombies, but then I thought about it again and realized that this was stupid and I was gonna just have to use the gold bloom. So I did, and with the help of the gold bloom I was able to plant down a few more chompers to get every lane covered. And then after a very long time the gold bloom recharged and I was able to use another one, and this led to me having 2 chompers in every lane for the final wave. And with the setup we beat night 3. Day 5 started off with me planting a Chomper and then the gold bloom right after. Next up, getting a whole column of the Chompers down, and I completely ignored these sun graves for some reason. I don't really know why. I think it was just out of pure laziness because I knew that the Chompers I had would be enough. There's not much really point in mentioning these guys, but the level also introduces the Jesters. And in the face of the Chomper, the Jester is basically just a regular zombie with no special powers. And we beat night 5. Night 6 I prepped some defenses, and I placed 15 Chompers in a semi-staggered formation. And I added a couple Chompers to this defense as the level went on, but as these were more than enough to beat all the zombies on the level, night 6 was taken down. Night 7 started and I realized that I'd done goofed. Since the last level didn't let me pick any sun producers, I forgot that I couldn't just auto pick this level and would have to go out of my way to pick the gold bloom. And this I did not do, and I just auto picked, so I had no sun producer to help me this level. And for this mistake, I just let the zombies take me down as kind of a walk of shame. So technically, my first attempt of night 7 was a failure. But on the second attempt, of course, I brought gold bloom and planted a healthy column of chompers to take down the zombies that had previously taken me down. A revenge that was destined. And this final wave spawned a lot of imps from the graves, but they weren't too big of a deal since the zombies that were actually sent were kinda only just a couple of nights that didn't really do much, and we beat night 7. Night 9 introduces the speed and health potions, and the health potion doesn't really do much because the Chomper doesn't really care about the health of the zombies, but the speed potion can definitely be annoying if the Chomper is trying to digest zombies, and if a mega speedy zombie gets into contact, the mega speedy zombie is definitely going to win that battle. But thankfully we didn't run into this situation on night 9. The final wave again only had like 6 zombies, and I think it's because the knights were introduced, and I feel like whenever the game introduces tankier zombies, it trades the number of zombies just for the tankier zombies, trying to balance the difficulty. But the Chomper walks right through this, beating night 9. Night 11's that one level where it has that gravestone in the very back that I can't really do much about with the Chompers because they can't hit it. So it's kind of just a game of luck, and if the gravestone spawns zombies, we lose. If it doesn't spawn zombies, we win. As we approached the first flag, everything was looking good with the gravestone, but the first flag introduced wizards, who were definitely going to be a problem against Chompers. But this time I had enough sun where I could just place the Chompers right in front of the wizards and take them out instantly. I did the same with these 2 wizards as well. And the gravestone in the very back didn't spawn any zombies, but the 2 right by it spawned 2 coneheads. One which was taken out by the Chomper that was already there, and then I tried to take this bottom one out, but I completely misclicked and placed down a gold bloom, later placing a Chomper on that tile. And as that far back grave didn't spawn any zombies in this entire level, night 9 was pretty easily beat on the first try. Night 12 is a pretty scary one because we have to keep these puff shrooms alive, and the only danger is really the jesters and the wizards, but there's also the factor of us having to plant food the puff shrooms so they don't disappear completely. And I was so worried about the wizards and jesters that I completely forgot about this. So on the first attempt, all the puff shrooms actually ended up disappearing and I lost. This might be the first time ever I've lost because of this. On the second attempt, I was much more wary of the surroundings and plant fooded the puff shrooms when they started blinking. The jesters actually ended up being pretty easy because they can't just return the Chomper's chomps. But what was actually surprising was the wizards that got chomped right away and couldn't really sheepify any of my plants. And with the 2 main threats basically being useless, night 12 was also beat very easily. Night 15, I prepped some defenses. I ended up going with the double back-to-back combo and also a stagger in the back, and then adding some more chompers as the end was approaching. And this wasn't really even needed because we beat the level without losing any chompers. Night 16 started off with a gold bloom and then also 2 columns of chompers, but it also introduced the kings, who nightify the regular zombies to make them tankier, but this doesn't really do anything against the chompers. So the kings basically just sit there thinking they're doing something until the end and then self-beheading themselves. Day 17 had a lot of sun gravestones, so I got a lot of chompers down and I'd only killed like 3 zombies so far. And by the time I reached the first flag, my defenses were a lot neater and a lot stronger. And I decided to just keep them the same until that last flag with having an access to 1,000 sun. And the final wave sent this gargantuar who seemed to be a little scary, but then the plant food took care of it, and then also this wizard beating Night 19. And here was the last level of the Dark Ages that we play. Night 19. And in this level, we're tasked to protect these 3 magnet shrooms. So I quickly get 3 chompers right in front of them. And then by the first flag, I had down the double back-to-back combo. And this was literally enough to take down the rest of Night 19, beating the Dark Ages. Next up, the Neon Mixtape Tour. Neon Mixtape Tour day 1 starts, and this is one of the worlds that caught me very off guard. In my mind, there wasn't really any zombie that could really face the chompers in this world, but a little later on, there's this one zombie that completely turns this opinion upside down. But as it doesn't exist on day 1, we beat day 1 pretty easily. Day 2 starts, and it introduces the Mohawk zombie, and also has 2 flags that we have to go up against. So I pretty quickly get my first column of chompers down in the front, and then start planting the second column right behind them. And thankfully, even though the Mohawk zombies are pretty speedy, the chompers are able to bite them down before they're able to kick the chompers back. Unless, of course, the chomper is already swallowing the other zombies. But with that, day 2 is beat. Day 4 starts, and it already has 3 flags that we have to go up against, which is pretty crazy. But again, as I was pretty confident in the early levels of this world, I placed my chompers very up front just to get it over with faster. I had to make a little adjustment for these 2 zombies in the top middle lane because I didn't have enough sun at the time, but then finished that front column with the chomper a little later on. The number of zombies was definitely increasing as well, which had me a little worried, but not too much. But then I realized I should be more worried than I am because 2 of my front choppers got eaten and then the middle one got kicked back 1 lane. But as the last flag was approaching, thankfully it only had a few zombies because they focused more on sending bucket heads and mohawks, so just less zombies but tankier ones, and because of that we beat day 4. Day 5 is a pretty cool and weird one because we have to protect these fat beets and walnuts. So my first move was to protect all of these by planting a chomper 1 lane in front of them. I say this one's a little weird because I never really understood why it's 2 fat beets and 2 walnuts. It feels just like a random assortment of plants. I mean, the fat beets make sense because they're a part of this world, but the walnuts confuse me. We had a couple chompers in the middle lanes plant food, which made the next waves come out faster, and this became a little bit of a problem in that top lane because the chomper started swallowing a zombie and the mohawk was able to just roam freely and kick the walnut back a few lanes, but that chomper was able to handle it once it swallowed the zombie is swallowing. Out of context, that would sound insane. We almost had a problem in the bottom middle lane because the chomper there was also full and a mohawk was approaching, but then I quickly plant fooded it just to take care of it. But then after that, most of the plants had a double chomper combo in front of them protecting them, so it was going pretty well. And with that, day 5 was beat. Day 7 starts and my chomper instantly plant food, swallowing absolutely nothing. Thankfully, the second chomper was a little smarter and it didn't do that, and I also had a zombie coming in its lane, so he ate it. We also had some early mohawks that were coming, and they always scare me because they get really close to the chomper and then the chomper decides to eat them. Like, I always think that the chomper is about to get kicked back, but then it just doesn't happen. And then day 7 also introduced the rainbow skater zombie, who was an extremely big problem against the potato mines if I remember correctly, but this time the chompers are able to easily take care of them. So this isn't the zombie menace I was talking about on day 1. But with that aside, the first flag of day 1 sent in a crazy number of zombies, which terrified me at first. But then the chompers somehow pretty easily took them all down. And then the final wave of day 7 was really weird because it literally only sent zombies in these 2 lanes, and it was just a massive horde of bucket heads behind 2 rainbow skaters. And of course, low numbers is what Chomper thrives against, so we beat day 7 pretty easily. Day 8 started and the music instantly started blamming with the mohawk, but my Chomper that instantly plant fooded was able to pretty easily take it out. Then a little later, a skater was sent with a couple normal zombies behind it, but it was just enough zombies where the Chomper had had to start digesting, so this buckethead almost ended up taking it out, but it got lucky because the Mohawk kicked it back and then the Chomper was able to eat both of them. And when the second flag was sent in, we almost had the complete double back-to-back Chomper combo set up, but we're just missing that top lane, and of course since we didn't have it, that top lane got ran through. So I had to place the Chomper a little farther back and it was able to recuperate. And then the final flag came in with a bunch of zombies, but we basically had a double back-to-back Chomper combo in every single lane. So they're able to take out all the zombies without a problem, in the end beating day 8. Day 12 starts and it only has 2 flags this time, so it's a little bit easier, or so I thought, because this day actually introduces the menace, the microphone whipper zombie, who when the music is playing is a Chomper's worst nightmare because it just takes it out. But somehow the second Chomper was able to take out this microphone whipper, and I say somehow because you'll notice later on that I try to implement the strategy but it just never works out. For some reason it only worked out that one time and then never again. As you can see, I got very scared of these guys because I was like, how do I even take these out without wasting plant food? So I just tried to do something but it didn't work out, and I ended up just using the lawnmowers to take both of these guys out for now. And thankfully the first flag of day 12 didn't send in too many zombies, so I was able to stall a little bit and make some more sun for later on. My Chomper placements started becoming a little more sporadic and also more focused on the back end of the map. And this is the first sign of panic within these levels because I stopped placing the Chompers very up front and have to resort to placing them in the back just in case. Oh yeah, this level also introduced the Gargantuar of the world, but as we already know, not too many of them are ever sent, so we can just use our plant foods on them. And these were the last zombies of day 12, so I was able to plant food that first Chomper, and then the second Chomper took care of the 2 imps, beating day 12. Day 13, I prepped some defenses. And of course, I chose to do the double back-to-back Chomper combo. But not even 15 seconds in, the first complete layer got decimated by the roller skaters. And then the second one got kicked back by the Mohawks. And the Mohawks kicked all 3 layers all the way to the back. And now I was left with these Chompers, and this isn't too bad, so let's see how it goes. And this is where I got cooked. I had all my Chompers placed down, no more sun, and only 2 plant food left with all these microphone whippers coming in, and the Chompers basically couldn't do anything against them. And even if I did get rid of those front ones, the game sent in even more in the back. And then they took the lawnmowers before the second big wave even came in. And this was basically GG's because I can't plant any more Chompers since no sun drops in these levels. And of course I can't use the powers, so I decided to just restart. On the second attempt, I chose to do the triple back-to-back combo instead of 2 double back-to-backs. Then I also decided to add a 4th column behind them as well. And then of course the microphone whippers came in, and this time I had 350 sun left, hoping to get some lucky plant foods off, and I did with the first Chomper, but the second one sold me and didn't plant food by itself. The same thing happened with the third Chomper, but then I immediately shoveled it just to get some of the sun back. And then I placed a 4th one that also didn't plant food, so I shoveled it as well. And then I placed a 5th one that did plant food, but only took out like a couple of the microphone whippers, so it didn't really do much. And then as the final wave was coming in, I decided to shovel these last 2 Chompers just for extra sun, because these 2 lanes didn't need any damage since the lawnmowers would just take care of the zombies there. And with the extra sun, I placed a Chomper up top because I brain farted and forgot that the microphone whippers can hit across lanes. And then right after, I planted a Chomper in the bottom lane, which plant fooded, and then it made me realize this might actually be possible since I still have 3 plant food left of my own. So I used the plant food on the bottom lane to take care of these guys, but then by the time I was about to place the top one, the microphone whippers got to it, and this was where I lost again. They should add these guys to Garden Warfare 2 just to get rid of all the Chomper mains. On the third attempt, I chose to do a quadruple back-to-back Chomper combo, the first of its kind, and also I moved them 1 tile back. And this was because in the previous attempts, the front column always got killed by the roller skaters, so I thought it'd be a good idea to move the 1 lane back to give them enough time to kill them. And then I also took another strategy from that last attempt. I would start shoveling my Chompers as soon as they started digesting zombies, because at that point, they're basically useless and they're gonna get killed, so why not just save up sun? And I was losing some Chompers here and there, but I was saving most of them just by shoveling them. And comparatively to the previous attempts, I had the same amount of Chompers on the screen and also 400 extra sun. And then came in the microphone whippers, so I tried to shovel my Chompers as fast as possible to save up sun and then rely on the Chompers insta plant fooding when I placed them to take care of most of these guys. And this strategy basically only worked 1 time in 1 lane because I was getting extremely unlucky with the insta plant foods. So even though the strategy felt better, 3 lawnmowers still got taken this time, which was more than last time. But there was a massive difference this time. I had 600 sun to work with, and all I had to do was beat all the zombies in the top, middle, and bottom lanes. So I was planting chompers rapidly in that top lane to try to get it to plant food, and one did. Right after planting a chomper at the bottom, which also plant fooded and pushed all the zombies back, and now it was only the middle lane to worry about, so I decided to use one of my 3 plant foods that I had in my inventory. And as the chomper's plant food ability stalled for time, this gave me a chance to get another insta plant food off, and the bottom lane did, taking out all the zombies in that lane. And then the top lane also instant plant fooded, leaving just 1 zombie. And now all that's left was this middle lane, and I realized I had won because I had 2 plant food, and that was enough to take care of the rest of the zombies on the screen. And then I felt like I had to win in style because I had enough sun to try to keep shoveling the chompers and get an insta plant food off. And after a couple tries, I did exactly that, getting the insta plant food and then using my last plant food on that top zombie. In the end, beating day 13 without the need to use any of my coins. And if you thought day 13 was bad, day 15 gets much worse, and you'll see why. We had to protect these fat beats in all 5 lanes. And I specified the all 5 lanes thing because this means that we can't depend on any of the lawnmowers. And if you remember last time, we had to use all the lawnmowers to even have a slight chance of beating the level. So I was just hoping the amount of microphone whippers was very minimal. But I also had to oopsie this level because that middle zombie died from the fat beats, so I thought the top one would die, but the top one didn't end up dying because it was only being hit by 2 fat beats. So I actually lost on my first attempt to a pretty dumb reason. On the second attempt, however, when the zombie got close, I placed a chomper to take care of it, and in hopes of stalling for sun, I was delaying my placements a little bit, so one of the fat beats got pushed back 2 lanes, and everything was going well until the microphone whippers came in, who were just decimating all of my chompers right as I placed them. And eventually this middle one made it to my fat beat and whipped it till it died, making me lose. On the third attempt, I cooked up a different strategy, remembering that one fat beat that was kicked back on the bottom lane. I thought, what if I just let the Mohawk zombies kick back the fat beats so I have more time to protect them? And in doing that, I was able to get 4 of the fat beats pretty far back, but one of them had to stay in its original place because there was no Mohawk set in that lane. And this was going pretty well as I was making it much further than last time. But then I saw the middle lane microphone whipper and realized it was about to hit the fat beat, so I bought a plant food, but right as I bought it, it whipped and killed the fat beat, making me lose another time. On day 15, I employed the same exact strategy with the Mohawks, but for some reason, the music timing was a little off, so the Mohawk stopped kicking. And as all the microphone whippers were coming in, I bought 3 plant food because I knew I was going to need it. And I used 2 plant food on these middle 2 chompers to take care of the microphone whippers there, but the top one was getting really close, and I plant fooded the chomper, but the microphone whipper got a whip off last second, making me lose for the 4th time. Attempt 5 was the same Mohawk strategy employed in the beginning, with that same one Mohawk not hitting the guys because the music stopped. And this time I decided to buy 4 plant foods just to max out my plant food bar because I was pretty confident that I'd be able to beat the microphone whippers this time. And I was doing pretty well, plant fooding all the chompers at the perfect moments. And after plant fooding that top lane chomper, all that's left was that bottom lane microphone whipper, so I bought another plant food just to get rid of it. And after this microphone whipper was defeated, we still had the final wave to go against, but thankfully the final wave didn't send any microphone whippers in. But even though there was no more microphone whippers left, this chomper in the middle lane was digesting a zombie, so it got taken out by the roller skater. And I tried to place another chomper and it got instantly taken out. So I panicked and resorted to buying another plant food and plant fooded the fat beat, which took the roller skater out, and now I could place a chomper to take out the other zombies. And with that, we finally beat day 15. That panic inducing moment at the end could have been avoided if I just remembered to launch the mower. But now we're on day 17 and hopefully we're out of the danger zone. I was feeling pretty confident, so I placed a column of chompers pretty up front, and a couple of them got kicked back by the Mohawks because they were digesting the previous zombies. But the final flag only consisted of dancing kickers and bucket heads, so this minimal defense was able to beat day 17. Day 18 started and I thought it was going to be pretty easy because I only had 1 flag. And by the halfway point, I had a full column of chompers down. Then of course, the demons were sent in, the microphone whippers, and they completely wiped out that front column of chompers. So I decided to use one of my 2 plant food for the middle one and a plant food for the bottom one, having to sacrifice the top middle mower. Then a little bit later in the top lane, the dancing kicker kicked a bucket head to the mower and I lost that mower as well. But as now the final wave approached, there was only 2 lanes I had to worry about because the bottom 3 would be taken care of by the mowers. As you can see, there's no microphone whippers, so this actually ended up being pretty easy. Day 20 again was a level with only 2 flags, and pretty confidently I got a column of chompers off in the 3rd lane from the front, but then a microphone whipper was sent to the middle lane and I didn't want to lose all 3 of my chompers, so I decided to plant food this one chomper to get rid of it. And then 2 more were sent, but these ones had the microphone in their mouth and not in their hands, so they were easily beaten. But then 1 was sent in the top lane and it got double kicked by the dancers and took out out one of my chompers, but then another one right underneath took out the 2 front lane chompers as well. The top one got taken care of by a plant food, and the other one wasn't doing the microphone whipping anymore, so my chomper normally just took it out. And then the final wave was sent, and I was a little scared because the chompers that I had were very minimal and I didn't have any plant food either. But for some reason there were no microphone whippers sent, so we lost this one lawnmower in the middle, but otherwise still beat day 20. Day 21, we're tasked to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and thankfully they were pretty far back. And the first thing I did was get a full column of chompers down right in front of them. That easily took care of all the beginning zombies. And then the first flag was a little weird because it only sent zombies in the bottom 3 lanes, and as they were very minimal, we took them all out. But then there was a Garg sent who I plant fooded to try to just deal damage to it, but then it actually just ended up dying from the one plant food. Even after playing this entire game with just Chomper, I still can't say I understand how the plant food damage works against the tankier zombies. And after beating another Garg in the top lane Conehead, day 21 was beat. Day 23 was a normal level with no special challenges and only 2 flags. And the game tried to get a 1-up on me by sending a kicker and a regular zombie at the same time, but as my Chompers were planted 3 lanes back, we easily took care of them both. But then these arcade zombies came in. And if you remember the ice pushers from Frostbite Caves, these are very similar to them. But these, in my opinion, are much worse because the arcade machines kind of act like the tents in Lost City and can spawn infinite amount of zombies if they're not taken care of. And of course, the more zombies there are, the worse it is for Chompers. And combined with the microphone whippers, it was a combination of disaster. It was starting to look very rough 2/3 of the way in, so I decided to plant food this one Chomper to get rid of one of the microphone whippers. And thankfully, the other whippers stopped whipping, and my Chompers that I had placed down were able to eat them both. And now with these minimal defenses, my only goal was to try to preserve as many lawnmowers as I could for that final wave. And I lost one lawnmower up top because I was so focused on the zombies on the bottom. But my plan had worked successfully because I preserved 4 lawnmowers, and that one lawnmower that did launch took out most of the zombies in that top lane, leaving only one imp that I had to deal with. And to end it off, we had this one satisfying lawnmower taking out all the zombies, beating day 23. Day 24, defenses were prepped, and I chose to go with the double back-to-back up front. That was 1 lane back, and then 1 column of Chompers in like the middle-ish area. I don't really know my reasoning for the strategy, but I just went with it. And the first wave of zombies was pretty easily dominated with us only losing that front column. And these microphone whippers that came in, thankfully, weren't spinning their microphones around, so all 3 of them were eaten without casualty. The second big wave sent in this Gargantuar that was causing some havoc to my Gargantuars, so I had to use one of my 4 plant food to take care of it. And then these 3 microphone whippers came in, and I tried to quickly shovel all my Chompers to save some sun, which I was successful in. And then by the time that the microphone whippers reached the Chompers in the back, they stopped spinning their microphones, so they're taken out very easily. Now all that's left was to beat was that last wave, which was a very disappointing wave because all it brought was 2 Gargantuars. And the top one was taken care of by an instant plant fooded Chomper, and for the bottom one I used a plant food on it, but this time it didn't die, but instead it launched its imp, so I just let the imp reach the lawnmower and take care of itself and the Gargantuar, beating day 24. Day 25 only had 1 flag, so with confidence I placed a column of Chompers in the 3rd lane from the front, and the first microphone whipper wasn't whipping, so my Chomper was able to eat it, but the second microphone whipper was whipping, so one of my Chompers got hit. So I placed one in the back and quickly plant fooded it just to get my revenge. But then came a whole army of the microphone whippers that took out my front row of the Chompers, and I tried to quickly save some sun by shoveling the Chompers, but they got to most of them before I could get to them. And 2 of the microphone whippers made it all the way to the lawnmowers, and things started looking a little crazy as a lot of arcade machines came in before the final flag even came in. And as the last flag came in, I sighed a sigh of relief because I realized there's no microphone whippers and only mohawks that I had to deal with. And with this last lawnmower, we took down day 25. But the game realized it was being too nice to me with the easy levels, so it threw this level at me, where we have to protect these 4 spore shrooms. And the strategy here is always letting these mohawks kick your spore shrooms back just so you have more leverage. And after they're pushed back, I quickly got a Chomper in front of all of them. And this microphone whipper with this dancer in the middle lane can be a little scary because if they get a perfect kick combo off, they can take out my spore shroom that's in that bottom middle lane. But thankfully they didn't this time. But then these arcade machine guys got very scary in the top middle and bottom middle lanes. And so overwhelmed by these, I didn't even realize that the real threat was approaching with the microphone whippers, who used the arcade machines as kind of a blockade and then slowly moved forward, taking out my spore shrooms. A very tactical play by the zombies. On the second second attempt, I planted a Chomper way in the back in the middle lane just to stall for sun. Of course, letting the Mohawks once again kick back my Spore Shrooms. Middle Microphone Whipper using a plant food on my Chomper. And then of course came the arcade machine guys one more time. And then again the Microphone Whippers with the breakdancers, who I truly didn't know how I was going to beat. And once again, overwhelmed, I lost. But on the third attempt, I felt like I knew what to do. So quickly I got the normal setup going. And then I started planting extra Chompers in the 2 lanes that the Microphone Whippers are sent. And also I bought 2 plant food with my coins just in preparation. In the top lane, I ended up not having to use the plant food. In the bottom middle lane, I did, so I used it and it took care of it very easily. And that was basically it, because all that was really left was this Garg in the middle, and we took care of it using a Chomper's plant food, and we beat day 26. Day 28 did introduce these Afro radio zombies, but other than that, it was also just a normal level with 2 flags. We did see 3 arcade zombies before the first flag even came in, but those were easily beaten, and the first flag sent in a very minimal amount of zombies. And now all that's left was the final flag, and I wasn't too worried because I still had all my lawnmowers. Day 29 started off also seeming like a very normal level with 2 flags. I was a little scared because it's day 29, so it should be a little difficult, but the first flag wasn't too difficult to beat. As we're approaching the last flag, a couple zombies made it to the end, taking 2 lawnmowers. But thankfully, the so-called big wave only had 2 imps and a gargantuar in the 2 lanes that were missing a lawnmower, so a Chomper with a couple plant food was able to take these guys out. And then the bottom lane, I just fed to the mower, beating day 29. And now here we were, the last level that we play of the Neon Mixtape tour, day 30, in which we could only have 15 plants on the screen. And might I add, it started off very crazy, sending in 3 Microphone Whippers as the first 3 zombies. So I was quickly planting and shoveling if the Chompers didn't insta-plant food just to save some sun. But sadly, reaching the first flag from the 3, the top middle lane had to be sacrificed to a lawnmower. And things were looking atrocious because I only had 100 sun and all these zombies to take care of, and it's only the first big wave. And because of this, we lost 2 more mowers. As these arcade guys were being very slow, I was actually able to get some Chompers down before the next big wave came in. And there were some challenging zombies on this flag, like the Gargantuar and the Microphone Whippers, who I took care of by using my plant foods. Now, as we'd approach the final wave, we actually built up a pretty decent army of Chompers. And all we really had to focus on was protecting the top 3 lanes. And one of them was beat by an insta-plant fooded Chomper. And the second one I bought a plant food for, but it actually just ended up dying normally to my normal Chomper, which was pretty cool. So I used the plant food on these bottom guys, beating day 30. Next up is the Jurassic Marsh. Day 1 of Jurassic Marsh started, and it had 2 flags already, which is pretty crazy because I feel like a level 1 should just have 1 flag, but this was just a sign of things getting more difficult. And the true difficulty of Jurassic Marsh definitely comes in with the dinosaurs, but as day 1 doesn't have any, it actually ends up being pretty easy. Day 2 of Jurassic Marsh also had 2 flags, but as I was still pretty confident, I was still putting my Chompers up in that 3rd lane from the front, and I thought this was enough to evade the Raptors because the bottom lane guy didn't kick the zombie forward, but this middle lane Raptor actually ended up kicking the zombie forward before my Chomper could eat it. So I had to place another Chomper to take care of that zombie. And by the time the second big wave came in, I had 2 columns of Chompers down, one in the very front, one in the back, so it was pretty much enough to beat all of day 2. Day 4, we'd already jumped to 3 flags, and before any zombies came out, the blue Raptor came out first. But thankfully, before it could get its kick off, my Chomper ate the zombie. But my Chomper was unsuccessful with this cone head as it got kicked over right away. And as I barely got the sun, by the time the cone head was reaching the last lane, I got my Chomper down and ate it. And then right after, this bucket head also got kicked over, but thankfully it was in that same lane, so the Chomper got it as well. And then the first big wave sent in a pretty measly number of zombies, so the Chompers in that front lane were able to take care of them all. And the second big wave only sent in like 6 zombies because more focused on them being tanky. So of course my Chompers easily took care of them. And then on the final flag, the game definitely stepped it up a little bit by sending in a ton of zombies in every lane. And I ended up losing the front middle Chomper to these zombies. But then to save some time, I planted another Chomper pretty close to them that took care of all 3 of them, beating day 4. Day 5 only had 2 flags, and I switched up the strategy a little bit by planting the Chompers 1 lane forward. And this was so that the Raptor couldn't get its kickoff, just because this allowed my Chompers to eat the zombies before it could do it. But this actually ended up not being enough because in the top middle lane, my Chomper was digesting a zombie and the buckethead actually got kicked over by the Raptor. And now with an atrocious looking defense, the final wave was sent. But thankfully I got sun at the exact right time to get rid of that Chomper at the top lane. And after that, I plant fooded this Chomper at the bottom to get rid of the last zombies, in the end beating day 5. Day 6 started and it only had 2 flags, so I thought it was going to be pretty easy. But then the game introduced this Stego zombie who instantly caused chaos, putting me in a pickle and actually making me lose 1 lawnmower right as the final wave was sent. But thankfully this also meant that I only had to protect this bottom middle lane from zombies, and as that lane only had one cone head in it, I was actually able to pretty easily beat it with this Chomper insta plant fooding. And we beat day 6. Day 8 starts with 2 flags and an early blue raptor and conehead who my Chomper instantly eats, and then 2 imps also who are pretty easily beaten. But then there's this one zombie in the bottom middle lane who got a little too far before I had enough sun, so I had to plant the Chomper one lane back. But for symmetry purposes, I filled that hole later on. And the first flag didn't have too many zombies, so it's pretty easy, but there was just one zombie who made it over because the raptor kicked it over, but then my Chomper was able to eat it. And then the final flag also sent a very minimal amount of zombies, so we beat day 8 pretty easily. Day 10 upped it a little bit by having 3 flags, and also the first dinosaur being sent being a Stegosaurus. As my Chomper placement is perfectly placed to counter the Stego, it didn't really do much. Or so I thought, because there's one conehead in the top lane my Chomper bit at, but apparently the Stego caught it before it could, so it actually got launched over, forcing me to plant another Chomper that actually insta plant fooded, killing the conehead and another zombie that was approaching. But as this was happening, another zombie was introduced, being the pterodactyl, that actually got a zombie behind my Chompers, but as the Chompers can actually hit the zombies from behind, they actually aren't very much of a problem. And then the final wave sent a pretty hefty amount of zombies, but I also had a pretty good amount of Chompers laid down. And after losing a couple Chompers, I was able to beat day 10 pretty easily. Day 11, we went back to 2 flags, but this imp was sent, and as I didn't have enough sun to place the Chomper in the right spot, I actually had to place it 2 lanes back, once again messing up my symmetry. But of course, I fixed this a little later on. In the back of the top middle lane, you can see the conehead that was dropped off by the pterodactyl, and honestly, it makes no sense that the Chompers can eat the zombies from that angle. But hey, if it works, it works. No complaining from my side. And with the pretty minimal final wave, we actually beat day 11 pretty easily. Day 12 is a pretty scary one because we can only lose 6 plants in total, and we usually lose a lot more than that. So I decided to play this one a little more strategic than usual and planted a column of Chompers in the very back 3 lanes up, and then slowly getting a double back-to-back Chomper combo down just to reduce the death rate of my Chompers. And then I was kind of scared of this huge wave, but it actually ended up being the saddest thing that I've seen so far. It was literally only 3 zombies. And as we're approaching the final big wave, the game sent in a blue raptor followed by a Jurassic Marsh gargantuar, and these guys are really tanky. But I had a strategy in mind for the gargantuar, and as it got really close to the Chomper and about to hit it, I plant footed the Chomper, sending the gargantuar back after taking massive damage. And as I approached the Chompers a second time, it was easily beaten with 1 bite. But then a second gargantuar was kicked forward in that bottom lane, who I tried using the same strategy on, but got heavily outplayed by the raptor, which kicked the gargantuar right over my Chompers. So I was forced to place a Chomper in the back and plant food that one, which actually took it out, beating day 12. Day 13 thankfully had no special challenges and only 2 flags, so I planted my Chompers in that front lane. But then I got a little outplayed again as this imp was launched by the Stego, and I couldn't get enough sun in time to defend against it, so it actually just ended up taking my lawnmower right as I was trying to plant my Chomper. And the first flag came in with a pretty decent amount of zombies, but we were able to beat them pretty easily. And on the final big wave, I was expecting something big like gargantuars, but actually only sent a couple zombies, and of course they were easily beat. Day 15, we're tasked to protect these 2 primal walnuts, and I actually stalled for sun on this level just by letting the zombie get by for a little bit. But then as other zombies started coming in, I placed a Chomper in the back to take care of that zombie as well. And then a raptor in that bottom middle lane kicked a zombie onto one of my primal walnuts, which actually chipped away a good amount of damage before I was able to get a Chomper to defeat it. And just so this didn't happen again, I placed a Chomper behind the other primal walnut just in case. And this actually came in very handy as a zombie was launched into that primal walnut. And now all that was left was the final big wave, which actually sent a gargantuar, but thankfully it's in the middle lane, so we don't really have to worry about it. And efficiently we beat day 15. Day 17, no challenges and 2 flags, so I placed my Chompers up front. And this first flag had a conehead that actually got launched over, but I placed a Chomper to take care of it. And then as the final flag was sent in, I had a pretty solid defense laid down, which carried me to victory. Day 18, I thought didn't have any challenges and only 3 flags, but then it introduced the T-Rex, a pretty goofy but obnoxious dinosaur that exists within the Jurassic Marsh. And its function is speeding up zombies extremely until they touch a plant. Kinda sus. But as you can see, this can get very overwhelming very fast, taking out a lot of my Chompers. But basically, I just needed to have at least 1 Chomper in every lane so the zombies didn't just sprint to the very end. And using the strategy, I was able to beat day 18, but it's definitely gonna get much worse. Day 21 has 3 flags, and it starts off with the caveman zombie, who of course faced up against the Chomper, gets 1 shot. But then this T-Rex almost got a 1-up on me, but I quickly placed a Chomper to block the zombies that were gonna get speed up. And then as the first flag was sent, I had a full column of Chompers down, down just in case any of the T-Rex were sent in. But then out of nowhere, a crazy horde of zombies were sent in the top middle lane, taking out one of my front lane Chompers and also taking out the back Chomper as well. But then I placed a Chomper in the very back who thankfully instant plant fooded, taking out the zombies that got very close. And now as the final wave was being sent in, most of the lanes had 2 Chompers in them, so they're able to easily beat all the zombies except the top middle lane where I had to plant food that one back Chomper to beat the zombies. And now as only one zombie was left, I placed another Chomper who instant plant fooded and beat day 21. Day 22 I prepped defenses. And with the blessing of a full open map, I used my free will to place as many Chompers as I could. And the zombies couldn't really do anything to this crazy defense, except this final Gargantuar in the top lane who was just ravaging through all of my Chompers one by one. And I wanted to see if this was enough Chompers to beat the Gargantuar without a plant food, and it was, beating day 22. Day 23, we went back to normal levels and 3 flags. I had to place a Chomper in the back because a Conehead got kicked by a Blue Raptor. And dealing with that Conehead, I didn't have enough sun to deal with the zombie in the bottom lane that got speed boosted by the T-Rex, so I ended up taking a lawnmower. And as we're approaching the final wave, a lot of dinosaurs and zombies had occupied the screen, but thankfully it was a very light final wave and we beat it no problem. Day 24 was similar with 3 flags and no special challenges. The first big wave and the second big wave were dealt with pretty easily, and now as we approached the final wave, we had 2 columns of Chompers down, allowing us to beat the level without any casualties. Day 25 was also similar with no special challenges and 3 flags, but it also included the Ankylosaur, who can be a little annoying because it just pushes my Chompers back every time it launches a zombie. So the strategy to this is just placing the Chompers very far forward, so it takes a while for the Ankies to push them all the way back. And using this, we beat day 25, no worries. Day 26 had 10 lanes covered with mold colonies in the back, so I had to make sure that the game didn't get any crazy dino tactics off. And I absolutely failed at this because the top lane ended up taking my mower. But thankfully that was the final wave, so we ended up beating day 26. Day 27, I prepped defenses. Again, using the power of free will, I planted as many Chompers as I could. And this time, they definitely did a little more damage than last time because of the Ankylosaur zombie, who was constantly launching zombies at my Chompers, pushing them off the map. But of course, we just had so many Chompers that this actually wasn't a problem, beating day 27. Day 28, we went back down to 2 flags and no special challenges. And by the time the first flag approached, we had a column of Chompers down in the front, which some of them got taken out by the imps. But as the final wave approached, we still had a pretty decent amount of Chompers on screen, and we're able to beat day 28 without losing any lawnmowers. And now we're on day 30 of the Jurassic Marsh, which is the last level that we play, and it had 4 flags. I quickly got a column of Chompers down in the front, which took care of the first flag very easily. The second flag had an imp Gargantuar combo that ran through that first Chomper, but as they got close to the second Chomper, I plant fooded it and I pushed the Gargantuar all the way back. But then it was taken out with a couple of normal bites by the Chompers. And the third flag also sent a Gargantuar in the top lane who took out my Chompers, and I had to place another Chomper and then plant food it just to push it all the way back. It was also taken out with a couple of normal bites afterwards. And the final flag sent in a very minimal amount of tanky zombies, which were mostly taken out very easily. And really, with only the Caveman, Conehead, and Gargantuar left, we of course beat day 30. And next up is one of the more scarier worlds, the Big Wave Beach. Big Wave Beach starts, and I'm not gonna lie to y'all, this is the worst world of them all. Not really from like a difficulty standpoint, just from an annoyingness standpoint. Literally each and every level, I'm forced to wait for all these zombies to walk down the water and then get to my Chompers. And just because of this reason, this takes me literally double the time of any other world. I wish Big Wave Beach had like a quadruple speed boost. Not to give EA any ideas, but that's actually something that I would buy even if it was behind a paywall. Or maybe if someone's trying to make a mod or something. But with that aside, I slowly but surely made it to the final flag. And to speed it up, I used all my plant food and launched a mower. Day 2 already had 3 flags, which was pretty crazy. And the level itself was a little more bearable because it had some lily pads in the waters that I could utilize and the zombies would reach there faster. The second big wave came in, but as I had minimal zombies, they were all eaten pretty fast. And then the third big wave came in, which was the final one, and I plant fooded all my Chompers just to get the wave over with faster, at the same time launching a mower in one of the lanes, beating day 2. Day 4 had 3 flags and a few lily pads to work with, and the first and second big waves were easily easily beaten. And the third big wave brought in a pretty good amount of zombies, but as you can see, I had a lot of time to prep my defenses, so I had a crazy amount of chompers on my side as well, and with their help, we easily beat day 4. Day 6 was pretty generous with the forward placed lily pads, so I was able to start the level off pretty fast. And then I plant fooded this chomper that was up front and had a lily pad under it, so now I'll explain the rule for plant fooding lily pads. And I'm explaining this because the lily pads come in pretty handy, but it'd be pretty overpowered if I was able to just plant food them whenever I wanted. So the rule for it is that there has to be a chomper on top of the lily pad in order for me to plant food it. And with that, day 6 was beat. Day 7 only has 2 flags, but it's a pretty sketchy level because all the tiles will be underwater by the end of the level. So it's much better if we strategize around placing our chompers on the pre-placed lily pads. And as soon as I got a plant food, I used it on this one chomper to get more leverage with the lily pads. And then I used my second plant food on this chomper at the bottom because it was the only lane that only had one chomper in it. And now, as we're only 60% of the way in, you can see that my chomper army grew tremendously. And for some reason, this was legit the entire final wave, these 8 zombies. So my 14 chompers easily defeated them all, beating day 7. Day 9's also a pretty scary one because it limits our placing abilities a lot, and on top of that, it also has 4 big waves. So by the time the first big wave came in, we already had a pretty decent amount of chompers placed. And by the time we're approaching the 3rd flag, this army became even bigger. And as I was positive this would be enough, I let all of these chompers handle the rest of the level, beating day 9. Day 11 had 3 flags and a V shape of lily pads, so nothing too special to worry about. But then it also had the surfer zombies, who I thought I would have to worry about, but actually the chomper is just able to eat them before it lands, massively simplifying the difficulty of them. The only time there'll be a problem is when one of the chompers is digesting the other zombies and can't eat the surfer. And as the final wave approaches, there's actually a pretty cool glitch, or maybe like a mechanic you could call it, that happens with the surfer when you plant food a chomper. You can see that the water just goes all the way with the surfer until it reaches the chomper and then slowly fades away. I don't actually know if it's considered cool, I just thought it was cool. Day 12, I prepped some defenses. And I chose to plant all the chompers I could in all the safe spots. As I mentioned previously, the only time the chompers would actually die to the surfers would be when they're digesting other zombies. That's exactly what happened to all my frontline chompers in this level. But as we still had the 3 back lanes covered with chompers, we're able to beat all the zombies pretty easily, beating day 12. Day 14 seems like a normal level with only 2 flags, but it's actually a level that chooses our plants for us, and somehow Chomper ended up being one of them. And this was also one of the annoying levels that made me wait for all the zombies to come to my chompers because I had to place them all the way in the back. And as the first big wave came in with pretty minimal zombies, it was easily beat. And then a couple minutes later, the final wave came in, and with it, it brought the deep sea gargantuar. And in PvZ Heroes, this guy's terrifying when planted in the water lane, but against my chompers, it's made a joke as one plant food is able to take it out, beating day 14. Day 17 started, and it had some generously placed lily pads, but this bottom lane didn't have a lily pad to take out that zombie that was getting there, so instead I planted a chomper and it insta plant fooded and it took the zombie out, thankfully speeding up the process. But then the scary zombie of Big Wave Beach was introduced, the octo zombie, but thankfully I planted this chomper and it insta plant fooded, taking it out this time. And then the final wave sent in 2 more octo zombies, but thankfully I had 2 plant food and I used one to get rid of the last octo zombie, beating day 17. Day 19 had 3 flags and the lily pads weren't too generous, being pretty far back, so this was also going to be a long level. You can see that I'm only like 10% of the way there and I already have 8 chompers down. The first big wave was heavily focused on scuba zombies, so it was easily beaten. The second big wave sent in 8 regular zombies, which was also very easy to beat. And then the last wave also sent in a bunch of regular zombies, and as you can see, my chomper army had gotten pretty big, so we won. Day 20 is also a very sketchy one because all the tiles of the map are vulnerable to the water, so we're mainly just dependent on the lily pads that are pre-placed for us. But as I got my first plant food, I plant fooded this middle chomper just to give us more leverage, also taking out the octo zombie. And then this other octo zombie was sent in and I felt like it was about to cause havoc, so I actually placed a chomper that wasn't on a lily pad just to take it out. And then the final wave sent in a deep sea garg with an octo zombie. I planted a chomper that insta plant fooded, taking out the octo zombie, and then the deep sea garg caused some havoc but was taken out by the last chomper in that lane. And with the rest of the zombies being normal, we beat day 20 pretty easily. Day 22 had 2 flags and started off pretty similarly to the previous levels, as I planted all my chompers on the lily pads to begin, and then as the level progressed, added another column of chompers behind them. This level also introduces versus the fisherman zombie, who I think is probably the scariest zombie for the Chomper in this world. Not particularly in this level, but for one of the levels that comes in later on. This level, the fishermen just get dominated as soon as the Chomper reaches them. And now, as the final wave was coming in, most of the lanes took care of all the zombies, but the top lane still had a lot of them left. So I planted a Chomper that instant plant fooded, taking out 3 of them. And then I also used the last plant food I had to take out 2 more. And now all that was left was basically the cone head, because as soon as it gets taken out, the fisherman can't do anything else, so it just decapitates itself, allowing us to beat day 22. Day 23 is a pretty interesting one because we're tasked to protect these 3 banana launchers, and honestly just ends up being a fun level because we get to use the banana launchers themselves to take care of some of the zombies, like this deep sea garg that was sent in. And then things got a little scary as that top banana launcher got fish hooked by the fisherman, and then the zombie started eating it, but I quickly placed a Chomper to get rid of that zombie. And then I placed a Chomper in front of it just for when the fishermen try to hook it again. And this ended up working out pretty well. And thankfully, this plant food that I used on it was able to take out the deep sea garg that was approaching it. And now all that's left was these 3, and this banana launcher's plant food was actually able to do pretty good damage, leaving only the deep sea garg on screen with the imp. And I placed a Chomper and I was about to plant food it, but then I decided to just use the banana launcher's banana to end the level. Day 25 had arrived, and this is genuinely one of the scariest levels in Big Wave Beach. And it's not really because of the 4 flags or the sun limit, but it's a challenge where we have to beat 10 zombies within 5 seconds, which isn't a very easy thing to do with Chomper. Normally, the first 3 flags don't really give you a good opportunity to beat this challenge, and your chance to usually strike is right at this moment, where all these zombies appear out of nowhere. And if you look up top, I almost got it, but missed it just by a little bit. And as the final wave literally only sends in like 6 to 7 zombies, I ended up losing on my first try. And then as the opportunity had come again on my second attempt, I had stockpiled a lot of plant food, even buying a 4th one. And I ended up plant fooding 2 of the Chompers and then launching this mower at the bottom to get rid of these 4 zombies. And that was enough to complete the challenge of this level. And with that beat, the rest of the level was also very easy. Day 27 is again one of the levels where all the tiles are underwater. So as we get plant food, we use it to make more lily pads by plant fooding the Chomper and the lily pad. And using a couple more plant food, we're able to get a back-to-back Chomper combo in the back 2 columns. But then this octo zombie at the top was causing havoc to my Chompers and had to be taken out using one of the lawnmowers. And because of that previous Chomper, we ended up losing another lawnmower in the lane beneath because the scuba zombie got too close. But thankfully, in the final wave, the octo zombie and the fisherman were in the 3 lanes that still had mowers in them. So we easily beat the top 2 lanes and then just let the lawnmower handle the octo zombie in the bottom middle lane. Day 28 is also a scary one because we can only lose 5 plants. But thankfully, all the zombies sent this level are pretty easy, with the exception of a couple fishermen. And we're able to beat this level without losing a single Chomper or a lily pad. Day 29, I prepped some defenses. And of course, they're pretty minimal because that's what I was limited to. But as the level progressed, I plant fooded my Chompers, getting more lily pads and placing more Chompers. And it actually got pretty crazy approaching the final wave with all these zombies sent in. And right before the final wave was being sent in, we lost a lot of our Chompers. But thankfully, this was the final wave and we still had all our lawnmowers. But we actually ended up beating this level without the need of any lawnmower. And here it is, the scariest level of Big Wave Beach to play with the Chomper. This level is made scary because the guacodiles, even if they're touched a little bit, they start to do their one special ability where they act as a lawnmower, and that actually counts as the plant dying. And as we know, if the fishermen are given an opportunity, they'll snipe the guacodiles from across the map. And I was doing pretty well with the fishermen, but sadly I didn't notice that this deep sea garg launched the imp that it was carrying, and the imp ended up touching the guacodile, making me lose on my first attempt. On the second attempt, however, I didn't even want to take the risk, so I planted a Chomper and it insta plant fooded, not even letting the deep sea garg throw its imp. And this level actually ended up being pretty easy even with the fisherman zombies, because the Chompers would get hooked, but then they'd kill the fishermen as soon as they got close to them. And that was all of Big Wave Beach. Next up, the final world, modern day. And now here we were, the final world, modern day. And thankfully the pacing on this world is much better than Big Wave Beaches. There was this annoying portal on the first day which I had to quickly place a Chomper in front of to take care of the zombies. And with these 2 columns of Chompers, we took out most of the zombies. But these tanky ones up top were getting a little close to the end. But right as it's about to make its final move, the Chomper took out the all-star mech. And then the Conehead right after, beating day 1 pretty easily. Day 2 brought in the annoying explorer zombies again. again who glitch out against the chompers and end up sometimes dying to it, but then sometimes just killing it. And this one in particular made it all the way to the lawnmower. And then so did this one in the bottom lane because it took out my chomper and the one in the top lane. But thankfully there were no other explorer zombies in sight, and I just let the lawnmower take care of this big clump that was left. Day 4 already had 3 flags, and seeing these rainbow skaters come in, I kind of panicked, praying that there were no microphone whippers in this level. Thankfully there weren't any. All the other zombies were putting up a pretty good fight against my chompers. This final wave was actually pretty scary, but we're somehow able to beat it without the need of any lawnmowers. Day 5, the only real problem was this Gargantuar at the end was beaten with the use of a chomper's plant food, in return beating the level. Day 7 had 4 flags, and it's one of the levels that I can't forget because of how insane it is. It'll send some pretty easy zombies the first 2 flags, and then out of nowhere it'll swamp you with octo zombies. But with the help of a couple lawnmowers, we're able to beat them, beating day 7. Day 10 had a lot of zombies at this exact moment, but we're actually able to slowly chip them down before they got all the way to the end. Besides this one afro jetpack zombie who made it all the way. But then the final flag only had a couple zombies who I used a plant food to take care of. And then the snowball thrower was chomped to death, beating day 10. Day 11 was also a pretty easy level. Day 12 had 2 flags and we're only allowed to lose 10 zombies, which can be scary because of all the shovel zombies and this one Gargantuar that's sent in the final level. But the max level chomper was just too overpowered and we only lost 2 chompers. Day 15 is that one copy level from Jurassic Marsh where we have to protect these 2 primal walnuts, and we're able to beat the entire thing with about 2 columns of chompers. Day 17 had the turquoise skull zombies who would just decimate my chompers whenever they got the opportunity, but thankfully they're a very slow zombie, so they're pretty easily beaten. Day 18 had the annoying bulls who would launch the imps over my chompers, and the weird glitch happened again where I plant food my chomper and the bull's weird hitbox actually ends up hitting the lawnmower. Day 20 is a pretty easy level because it gives us a lot of gold tiles to work with, and we beat the level with an extra 1025 sun. Day 21 actually brought in the microphone whippers, but as this one was approaching the lawnmower, I was able to plant a chomper and quickly plant food it, taking that microphone whipper out. And then there was another one to deal with, but I was so focused on those guys that I actually ended up losing 2 lawnmowers to 2 all-stars that were in the adjacent lanes. But thankfully this was the final wave and I could sacrifice the rest of the lawnmowers to any more microphone whippers. And this final one I took out using a plant food. Day 23 was pretty easy throughout. It was only the final wave that sent in a couple of octo zombies and deep sea gargs, and with the help of a lawnmower and plant food we were able to beat them. Day 24 didn't really have any challenges in particular. Day 26 sent in a lot of zombies in the final wave, and we ended up losing a lot of our chompers and were dependent on 3 lawnmowers to help us. Day 29 overall was pretty easy. There was just one microphone whipper on the top lane who I allowed the lawnmowers to handle, and then the ones that were sent within the final flag I used plant foods to beat. And here is probably the scariest level of modern day. Day 30. We're forced to protect these flowers from being trampled on, and all the zombies sent in are very high health scary zombies. There's a pretty scary moment with this all-star in the middle lane as it killed my chomper, and I had to quickly collect a sun and place the chomper before it trampled the flowers. But in doing so, I hadn't realized that an imp had made it all the way to the end, breaching my house, taking me down. On my second attempt, the all-star in the middle actually did end up trampling the flowers that I tried to launch a lawnmower, but I wasn't fast enough. But on my third attempt, I ended up just spam buying plant food to help me out with this level, as it's literally the second to last level that we play. And with the help of this plant food, we only ended up losing 1 lawnmower, beating day 30. And now we made it to the final level of this challenge, where this one explorer actually made it to the end, taking one of the lawnmowers. But after this, the level got much easier and we eventually end up beating it. Now with only this imp cannon left, we had now beaten all of PvZ2 with only a max level chomper. Hope you enjoyed. Okay, bye bye.